understanding was for evening meetings, you come with the back door.
Yeah, I mean, the front ones will be open on the
Well,
weekends, I would think. But
okay. For your infrastructure committee. So,
I'm used to it being cut off.
well, yeah, so anyway, so I've been told them that they want to make sure they should come in the back door for night meetings, is that correct? Things happen, but that's really the intention,
Yeah.
right?
That's the safe part.
So this is really weird. Can you hear that?
It was cranked way up. Now it's actually turned down quite a bit.
Just touching my desk with paper. I
Oh,
hear
yeah.
that's a little.
Oh, yeah.
You don't hear it over there.
That is hot, baby.
Okay, I have nothing to say.
All right. We can do a rap battle.
That's right.
Yeah, not rap, though. He's like bluegrass. He's really good. Yeah, kind of newgrass, yeah.
I gotta play you my kids sometime. He's very good.
I don't know what the name of it was, because they were playing with another group.
Yes, they play quite a bit, and yeah, they are good.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, Tucker's been recording like crazy.
Nice. Is he with others or just doing the
Just
home
him.
recording thing? Yeah.
He like writes lyrics like constantly, and he was just doing straight up rap, but now he's discovered he can sing, so he mixes it up. He even mixed it with he even this last song he posted was all singing, which is very unlike him. Yeah,
Well, he found he could sing, and he found people who like him to sing.
Yeah, those are two different things.
Well, you got to compliment him.
well, he's got the one song. It's got about 4,000 listens on
Nice.
SoundCloud.
I met a guy this fall at, it was actually at my mother-in-law's funeral. He was the boyfriend of one of my cousins, or my niece's friends, who's there. And he works for a recording company. And he basically writes like beats and tracks, but he doesn't get songwriting credit. He writes them and sells them.
It sells them. Yeah, that's what's done.
And then the famous artists record over them.
Yeah,
And
people
it's like,
make
and
a
I'm
lot
like,
of money doing that.
yeah, but you don't get a royalty.
That's right.
Oh, whoa.
You
It's the
get
same amount.
you sell your beat, and then Drake or whomever
Yeah.
makes $1 gazillion on your hit, and all you got was what you got paid for.
Tucker
What you-
leases all his beats, so yeah,
And but that's what he does for a living. He basically,
He does.
can make a pretty good living doing
yeah.
that.
But why wouldn't he want to get?
Because that's he's not to that level yet. I mean, I suppose if he like wrote the lyrics and wrote the song,
Oh yeah,
I mean, there's a whole. He just kind of does the beats and the basic flow. They then put melody to it and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, it's a thing.
Whatever.
Oh, I didn't look at
It's like back in the early days when they made the songwriters put Elvis Presley on as a songwriter on the hits, and finally he made them stop.
Oh, he did.
'Cause
Okay.
He said, "I don't write songs. I don't deserve this credit." But
That's good.
Colonel Parker was doing it to make him get money.
Tom.
He's on. It's Hound Dog and a couple of the early hits. He's got his name as a songwriting credit.
February 13. All right, I haven't even looked at the agenda. Oh, that's weird. City infrastructure. It's all the talk now is infrastructure in Vermont municipalities. All the rage.
Rightfully concerned.
Everywhere, you look around
Yeah.
the country.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I mean, really, honestly, ever since, it's always good to point the finger at somebody else, but ever since the federal government in the 80s pulled all federal funding for this kind of stuff and revenue sharing, all that kind of stuff, locals and states haven't been able to keep up.
Yeah.
Thank Reagan.
Well. Remember when everybody had their Reagan impersonation? They were all modeled after, what's his name? Rich Littles.
What's that?
When everybody and their uncle everybody and their brother had a Reagan impression.
Oh, right.
No agendas?
Oh, you mean out there?
Agenda.
You know, oh shoot, I wrote on mine.
I can probably fire some off real quick.
Yeah.
I was just,
No. No, we can get some. We can do it. See if I can find one that's not got my can scratch on it. Good catch, Donna.
Because I use it.
No, right. Well, it should be out here.
I feel like I haven't been here in so long. I missed that one meeting, and then you all went and scheduled one on Thursday.
Did you go give you the minutes? That wasn't part of the packet, so I presume you haven't given you the minutes.
No, I've got it. They just weren't up in time to go with it. They're actually posted. They're all of about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sentences.
Yes.
Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Not a very exciting looking election we've got coming up.
I was disappointed. Just like, whoa. Did everybody or nobody? Isn't that the way?
That is exactly the way. That is how it works here. It's in cycles.
Time I ran, there was, that was because Glenn everybody signed up, every district had some competition. Don't worry, I'll do something controversial.
I thought you already did.
I did, but I mean, I don't think that's gone away.
It's the controversy that keeps on giving.
Yes. These arm things do come off. Do they come off easily?
Not sure what you mean. You mean on the chair?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never tried. I didn't actually know that they did come off.
It's a bolt. More than I can do on my own easily here. Hello, hello.
Guess we could turn on the lights back there if I can figure out where they are.
Are you staying for the whole meeting?
No.
Okay. Because at my counselor's report, I'm gonna hand these out, and I can say that I gave them to you, so I wanted to give to your committee. And I'm gonna ask Bill to make a scan of it, I just couldn't get my scanner to, anyway. Scan of it and give it to the city council, and he can send it to your committee too, because they're electronic. We had a neighborhood controversy on Brixton. And so we committed ourselves to reading books and articles and seeing some documentatives, and this was our first handout. And this is what I want the city to lead on eventually, is to do whether it's using our old neighborhoods that we established.
Which neighborhood is this?
I'm in District 1.
When you say neighborhood,
Oh, well, it's actually Elm Street, but people were from all over, but it was a neighborhood person who hosted it.
Was it from, Sir Speaking Up for Racial Justice?
No, 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 this isn't a group yet.
Um,
I don't know if that will be, but it's anyway. The idea is each of us feel like what we don't know, we need to know.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway, so these are some beginning documents I'm gonna share tonight, and this is our format as a group. And so we're trying to read and educate ourselves around this particular, because this is their
Right.
6 things. Anyway, so this came from Mark, Justice for All.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
okay.
Anyway, so if you'd like to have
Okay,
it.
Julia will be here, she might, I don't know how long various people are gonna stay. I can't stay, but I see we're number 9 on the agenda, so.
Oh, so you're gonna give it for the agenda, I'm gonna give it to you then. To make a formal presentation? Okay, so good.
Yeah, I'm saying to
Ken and Jeff, is it Julie?
Julia.
Julia.
Yeah,
Okay.
Julia,
Okay, we are going to get started. We're just a couple minutes past 6:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. First thing is to review and approve the agenda. My understanding is that from the advertised agenda, there we are removing the zoning fixes, which was item 7.
Correct.
And
I'd like to propose that we add 2 items to the end.
Yep.
One, discussion, likely an executive session regarding pending litigation, just to update for us to talk about the parking garage appeal. And a second one, dealing with a personnel disciplinary action. Both should be brief.
Okay. Any further changes to the agenda? So we'll consider the agenda approved without objection. So general business and appearances. This is a time for anyone from the public to address the council on a matter that is otherwise not on our agenda. And I'm going to take this opportunity to just say, I think the outside doors should be, or the one in the back anyway now, should be open. So that's good. Any comments from the public? Okay. Hello. All right, so we're going to move on. So the consent agenda. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
We got battling seconds.
Jace.
Okay, further discussion about the consent agenda. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This motion carries. All right, city infrastructure. So this is actually an item that was requested by Councilor Hill, as we had some recent water main issues, and so we'd love to just chat about where we're at. Welcome.
I'm surprised you're both still on your feet. Snow, rain,
And
and water everywhere.
we said it before, but please do pass on our just deep gratitude to your department.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
And it certainly goes to all the people of the department, including the gentleman in front of us. Tom was up almost 18 hours one of these nights personally handling one of the leaks. And Kurt was
118.
Kurt was there with him at least one of those nights. So it was from the top to the bottom in that department.
Yeah, there's certainly all hands on deck. We're sorry for all the inconveniences from all the water breaks and oil notices and everything.
Well, it's all your fault, you know.
Well, sure I had something to do with it.
You were out there with your
Rock, I guess,
sledgehammer.
Bad luck guy. Yeah, one night was in Nelson Street was we had two breaks simultaneously. Tried to fix them both at the same time. Give our thanks to a bike path contractor who came to our aid, Jay Hutchins. So Kurt and I and a couple guys from the water plant became water crew division members, while the other crew was working on the Bingham Street leaks. It's been certainly tough. I appreciate the community's support. We've gotten a lot of expressions of gratitude, from cookies to gift cards to, so people know what it takes, what they're going through. And hopefully that's over, but it's for now. But as we'll discuss tonight, we have a water system that has a number of challenges. It's not as though we haven't, we've been neglecting it. We've been working on water system improvements since the 1970s. It is a very old system. There's many miles of water main. So Clerk prepared a memorandum. First of all, I'm Tom McCarville, Director of Public Works. Kurt Monica, Assistant Director and City Engineer. I'm most familiar with our water system, so I'll turn it over to Kurt to, I know you just received this memo today. So understand if you haven't read it, so we'll briefly touch on that. We have a couple of, I think, very revealing charts, graphs that will explain what we've done, and turn it over to Kurt?
Alright, so, we thought we'd start with a little bit of background about, if this is an unusual year as far as the number of leaks we had, compared to previous years. And, one chart, so we've got data going back to 2012 from our asset management software, which tracks, work orders related to water leak responses. And just quickly to run through the years, in 2012, we had a total of 15 leaks. It jumped up to 33
You
leaks.
should have this.
Yep. This one has the totals on it, and that one is the graph, that relates to temperature. So on average, we're in the mid-30s from 2013 to 2015. It dropped off a little bit in 2016 to 26 total, down to 16 in 2017, and then last year we jumped back up to 33, which sort of seems to be roughly our average annual number of leaks.
I just interrupt for a second. On the scale of magnitude, these range from a leaking valve pipe to the more catastrophic leak failure of a pipe, so requiring a system shutdown. These don't differentiate the various types of water system failures.
So,
Does the number correspond with the intensity, the 1, the 5, the 4? Just number of actual breaks in that month? The little tiny numbers above the.
right, those are the number of leaks in that month.
Okay.
So like Tom said, this isn't necessarily an unusual year in the number of leaks, but this year happened to be two really significant leaks fairly close together, which I think the public, really took notice of the impact. Because when we have large leaks like that, we have to issue the boil water notices, which directly affects residents and businesses. So briefly, just some of the causes of the water leaks that we experience. One is frost action. So this graph, the red line is the temperature, and you can see, not always, but often, the number of leaks corresponds to the drop in temperature, the colder months. That's when we get more frequent leaks. So as the ground freezes and thaws, things move, pipes become brittle, and that can lead to leaks. Another issue we experience is pressure surges. So if there's a sudden stop or start in water flow, that can cause a pressure surge through the system. And in Montpelier, we have unusually high water system pressures. Our normal operating pressures in the downtown are about 200 psi, pounds per square inch. So it's really quite high for a water system to be running at. So when you get these pressure waves, for our system, they really have a greater impact, starting at a high pressure. And the third that we've really seen in the last probably 5 years, the third cause of water leaks is corrosion. So Montpelier has a lot of clay soils, and we've actually sent some of the clay soils out around a leak out for testing and found that they are highly corrosive. The ductile iron that was installed starting from about 1970 and out through the 90s was the preferred pipe material for water main replacements. Turns out that that's very susceptible to corrosion. So we're seeing a lot of failures in our pipes, in the ductile iron pipes that were installed in that time frame due to the corrosive soils we have here.
Oddly, some of our older cast iron water mains are still in service, so 100 years old, and are not seeing that level of corrosion that the ductile iron is.
Is that because of the material itself, or the?
It's a thicker wall.
Thicker.
But I'm not sure the actual difference, but.
Yeah. But they are performing better.
Iron, which makes the pipe more flexible, has apparently weakened the steel and made it more susceptible to the corrosive action.
Yeah, it's got different chemical properties in the steel, so it is more susceptible to corrosion, in addition to be thinner walled. So we're now switching to what's called high density polyethylene water mains. It's sort of a malleable plastic pipe. You can bend it, it can flex, it can contract, it can expand, and it's not susceptible to corrosion. The The downside is it is more expensive. But we have done one project last year on the View Drive. It was our first full installation of that pipe material.
Do those have warranties on them?
There are some warranty items, but generally those are not beyond a year.
Okay, thank you.
The ductile iron pipe that we're seeing failure has been in the ground for 30 years or more, that are, failing. So well beyond any warranty that would have been.
And, sorry, about it's HDPE pipes that you're using now, is that right?
Right.
They're flexible. Do you know how long they stay flexible? I have the idea that plastic gets more brittle over time.
All right, so PVC is another pipe alternative, and that can get brittle after a lot of expansion and contraction movements. HDPE, one thing they look at when they're testing pipe materials is how many pressure surges it can take over time. HDPE has the highest above PVC and ductile iron. So from what we've seen, it could last 100 years.
The new water main on Northfield Street is PVC. Again, couldn't get away from the ductile iron pipe. It is a thicker wall pipe, and it doesn't have the UV protection. It's meant to be buried. I think a lot of that brittle that you hear about is from ultraviolet breakdown of the pipes. So they have a very long life in the ground. It's really inert.
I think a key takeaway from all of this, talk about the different ductile iron and all that, is that it's not necessarily the oldest pipes that are failing. And I think that's one of the things we heard often. We have these old pipes that we haven't replaced, but it's a particular type or brand of pipe that was actually, some of which were put in 30 years ago, thinking at the time that was the best thing to use. That was what the standard was. So it's just.
So Elm Street, both Elm and Nelson Street failures with ductile iron pipe. Elm Street, I believe, is about 48 years old.
Right.
Don't recall Nelson, but it's 40 to 50 years. Oddly, the Elm Street water main, it was perfect. Other than the long crack in it. The external, there was no pitting, there was no corrosion on it. Internally, it was clean. The cement lining was all intact. I believe that may have been related to a joint that it was connected to that caused a crack to radiate 11 feet down the pipe. So there's a number of reasons and causes for these. I think the HDPE pipe is seamless, it's fused, and not susceptible to that type of cracking.
So one of the things that, one of the comments that I have gotten from people after that, the series of breaks, was, what is the city doing to be proactive about it? And I know, we have been, like with Northfield Street and I think Harrison, a couple, like last year or the year before or so, we've been sort of preemptively going in there and redoing some of the lines. Where can people expect us to be proactive this coming? I know the answer to this question, but just so that we can talk about it, so people know that we are planning on fixing some of these lines before they have broken. Where are we looking at for the coming season?
Right. So this summer we're planning to reconstruct Clarendon Avenue. In addition to water main replacement, there's also sewer storm separation work produced with those, and then the street rehab itself. So that's our really big project for this summer. We also have a plan to do some in-house work. Most likely, I think we're going to look at Quesnel, which is the last really significant galvanized water main that we have in the system. So our replacement has really been focused on worst first for water system work. We're trying to get rid of all the galvanized pipe, which is really prone to leaking. It's just very brittle, installed probably in the 60s. So yeah, it'll be Clarendon, hopefully Quesnel, depending on the work demands on our staff. But
Sure, great, thank you.
There is the water system master plan, and that's a number of mains are phased in, replacements, schedules are identified, funding levels. So that's the plan we're following. Rethinking that a little bit now, hopefully able to advance some other projects, but for example, East State Street, several of the leaks on these graphs are East State School. And in fact, we still have a minor leak on East State. We haven't found the actual location of it. And that's even tougher in the winter because of the frost and doesn't always surface. So, so East State Street is part of our reconstruction plan, presently proposed in 2022. There's a lot of sewer separation work, and so it'll be a reconstruction project. That one street, that was really our first major leak of the season in November, and was the last leak of this series of leaks. That was another early morning project. So that's one that we're really hoping to get moving along quickly.
Sooner than 2022.
If we can, but
Yeah.
it takes a couple of years to put these projects together. There is some state funding assistance and the pollution control grant that we're applying for. So there's quite a bit of preparation work to put a project together like that.
Ashley, and then I hope to move on soon. Okay.
Sure.
Oh, and then Rosie, yeah.
So that was actually one of my questions. It seems like, so, I think we had one on East State over the summer. We had one at the upper end, almost in the same place. Was that maybe December? I'm assuming it's almost. And then we had two on Lower East State, is that right, this winter? So I'm curious to see, I know that that's been in the works for a while, and I know it's slated for 2022, but I'm just curious if there's any sort of flexibility in redetermining and what kind of support you would need for the council to allocate, or if there's a way to sort of address that, because that seems like a constant problem area. It sounds like there's still something that we just can't find where because of the weather, but I'm just curious if there is a plan to reevaluate the timing on some of those more critical areas.
Well, we're starting to talk about some ideas. I need to start thinking out of the box. Again, we're limited trying to be mindful of our the costs the ratepayers paying, outside funding potential. There is a bond scheduled in the master plan for additional work that would cover that one project as well. But looking at other alternatives that might be available to us and starting to think a little bit out of the box on how we can advance that project. But again, takes, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple of years to put that project together. There's planning, there's design, there's survey, there's permits. So a 2-year project advancement is a fast track type of project. So.
And again, I know you already said this, but just to remind everyone with that, because this isn't just a fixing of water means, water, sewer, CSO, and a complete rebuild of the road, so it's a major, it's a smaller version of the Northfield Street project that we did. And reminder that we're gonna be upgrading our sewer plant, our wastewater plant, which is a very major project, which is gonna take a huge amount of Kurt's time just on that coming up, so. But we are talking about some funding systems to maybe speed this up.
Right, we are looking at the state revolving loan fund, which has a series of engineering steps you have to follow to get eligibility. So just to get through that process is about a year, which I will be applying for funding through that this week, just to get that process started. So yeah, we will bump it up if we can, absolutely. It is a priority for us.
Rosie.
A couple of thoughts and questions. One is, I was a little bit concerned about the loss of water for some of our larger customers who are located up high, specifically U32 and National Life. And I wanted to know if we kind of thought about doing any outreach to them about the work we are taking to make, the steps we are making to make sure that doesn't continue to happen, because I know the U32 had to close for a couple days because of the boil water notice and the loss of pressure. And I have no knowledge that they're considering this or thinking about this, but if I was in that position of a large customer up high who might feel like my service from Montpelier had become less reliable, I might start thinking about what my alternatives are. And so we certainly don't want to lose those customers, and so I think it would be good for us to kind of do some proactive outreach and say, hey, we realize this was an inconvenience, this is what we're doing to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, we had a similar situation on Northfield Street with Westview Meadows.
Mhm.
A lot of conversations with them. It's really similar to a hospital
Yeah.
facility, and the public outreach, or the outreach with that organization began, and we were able to advance, get that project, and we thankfully haven't had those types of problems. I have spoken, actually throughout the Elm Street failure, was in regular contact with the National Life Facilities Director. Let them know what we're doing. Really, that was a short-term shutdown. We had trouble, because it's such a large water main, shutting that down completely. They actually had water back fully restored by, I believe, 8:30, 9 o'clock that morning, but they had already made the decision to clear out. So we have been communicating, at least through the facilities director, but I think it's smart that we also reach out further
Yeah.
to discuss that.
And I noticed that there's text in here about how the boil water notices have changed, and I'm not really sure how that impacts some of those large customers. If there is a boil water notice, they can't, can they have, for example, have school open, that sort of thing? So maybe that's part of what's happening here, is that because we are now issuing more of the boil water notices in accordance with state regulators, that's causing additional problems for them. So just to.
I think that's a choice of the schools. I know Montpelier School stayed open. I don't know whether, I know U32 was closed the day of the break. Montpelier School stayed open, but after that, I can't remember if they closed because of the boil water notice or not.
I
But
was
I know
under the
the- I
impression
know
they were
Montpelier
closed another
schools did
day, and
not.
I thought it was because of that, but
Could be, I
this
don't
was
know.
secondhand.
I had heard that it was just because they couldn't flush toilets the first day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then I don't know about the second day,
Yeah.
so.
So we also just did have a lot of communication during the water breaks with our water plant
Because
operators.
you were all
about-
out there.
Well, we also have, talked to them about sampling, the
Mhm.
timing of it,
Yeah.
so, and the leak when we're gonna restore it. Just one note on what we're doing to sort of hone in on boil water notices. So they're required when pressure drops in the system below 20 PSI. We don't have a pressure monitor on Gallison Hill. Like, we don't have a gauge that tells us what the pressure is that we can read remotely and trend. So we're gonna, you guys will be seeing a proposal soon to add that. There's an old booster station that's heated and enclosed. It's halfway up Gallison Hill that the city owns, that we can pretty economically install a pressure transmitter there. And we'll know when they lose pressure, when they know,
Great.
or when they don't. And so hopefully that will help to reduce the number of boil water notices for
Yeah.
that facility, because we can't now verify when they lose pressure.
So that would be the perfect sort of thing to communicate with them and say, hey, we realized that this was an issue and we're doing something.
You're right. First thing we had to do, though, is to put all this plan together and then
Yeah.
start to reach out. So we've got it debriefed after all of this. And so I hear what you're saying, but we need to first come up with a plan and then understand that it actually will work. We have spoken with another consultant as well, two consultants, one a systems engineer for our plant, for some of these remote readers. Some of the options we're looking at, which is described in this report, but we have a kind of a shock absorber idea, pressure relief system. So when these hammers, and it could be a fire that causes a tremendous surge of water and then it shut down abruptly, can cause that pressure wave to go through the system. I think Nelson Street, because it was such a catastrophic loss of water, they shut it down quickly and they felt a 10 PSI pressure wave up at the plant. So one of the things that we're looking at is the two booster pump stations, dialing those down from a 20 PSI down to a 5, where it would relieve that pressure. So we've learned a lot from this, and I think we have some good things we can do pretty immediately, and then more longer term plans, and then we'll get that out. But
Great. Two other things I wanted to note. One is, you talked a little bit about funding, and I just want to remind this council, because you may not have
the new folks might not have thought about this much, that how important it is to make sure that we charge all of this water work to the water fund to ensure that the water ratepayers, including folks like the state and some other folks who don't pay taxes, although they do pay pilot instead, that they are fairly and fully charged for those costs, because this is our mechanism of making sure that our water customers do pay for the costs, and some of those water customers are the very large customers. So just to flag that for fellow counselors. And then the other thing I wanted to think about a little bit was, my understanding is that some of these kind of extreme temperature fluctuations going back and forth, that those cause breaks more frequently. And is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, right, so that's really what this chart is
Yeah.
illustrating, is the temperature changes and the correlation to the frequency of leaks.
So I've been thinking a little bit about, with climate change, is this something, we have our plan and, our, how we're gonna be addressing all of these issues, but do we need to be thinking about putting a little bit more money towards infrastructure in order to address these issues? And maybe this is a real cost of climate change, and we need to take that into our steady state planning. So not something to decide tonight, but just something to flag.
Great. Further comments? All right, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing how it all, works out with the funding, and, looking forward to the work getting done. So, thank you. Okay. So the North Branch East.
Yes. I think as you recall, we had a discussion about, it's what we've ended up calling the former Vermont Association for the Blind, the former MOAT, and the former TKS properties, the three properties that the city owns. We had some discussions in the fall about, should we continue with the development plan for those? Should they become open space, or what should we do? You directed me to look at options and come back with a recommendation. I pulled together a working group of some stakeholders. I think you've been kept in the loop of those meetings and the notes from those meetings. So I just tried to pull together all of those as one big summary for you, with basically the final conclusion, which is basically that we said, let's do some master planning before, we're spending a lot of time over a very small period a very small piece of land. We're getting kind of worked up without thinking of this in the context of the whole. So let's take a look at a downtown master planning effort. That would, and I see some folks snuck in from the group, so please jump in if there's anything you have to add. And that what we should do is think of an interim solution that doesn't preclude either the development plan or the creation of green space, and which perhaps in the short time does open up some more open space that wouldn't have otherwise existed. So one of the, I think what we came up with for guiding principles was keep the development lot open, put whatever road pavement that was going to be would have to go through where the parking lot was going to go. So if we went back to Plan A, we wouldn't be, we'd only be paving where there's already going to be pavement, and that we had to have a functioning road, of course, going back in. So I think people got on board with that. We've got a draft of that plan. We can make some final tweaks. We took a look at rough costs. This is not in your memo. I just actually got these numbers recently. Currently, we're estimating about $600,000 to construct the original plan. We think it'll be about $535,000 to construct the interim plan. Now, so that's a savings of $65,000. To note that we only pay 10% of that, so it's really only saving to the city of $6,500, just so we're clear. If we were to then go back and put everything back the way we were going to do it in the first place, it would probably be another $150,000, all coming from the city to go back and do the original plan. So while it'll cost a little less to do the interim plan, we will then bear the cost of putting it back, because we'll be redoing some work. That obviously could be perhaps the cost of a developer if they were going to go do that. And obviously, if there were to be a park or something else put in, then those costs, including the repayment to the state, would be involved. This has not yet, pending on, waiting to see whether this was an area that you all wanted to pursue. If it is, then our next stop will be to review this plan with state and feds and make sure they're on board with this. But that's that's really all I have to offer, and that I think it's all, otherwise it's all in writing. As I said, I see Elizabeth, I see MDC here, Laura's here. Corey, of course, was our key staff person on this, and Tom. So if any of them want to weigh in, happy to have them.
I want to make just one comment.
And
that-
Donna attended
But
the meeting.
all these different stakeholders came together, lots of different opinions, and right away, given some comments, particularly from Greg, people fell in line that rather than to fight over these bits of little property, to really work at a similar aim. And that was really, I really liked the process. You all did good work.
Thank you.
And Bill, you led it.
Good people in the group.
Just jump in, great comment. So Laura Gephardt, the executive director for the Montpelier Development Corporation. So as part of that group, I just wanted to kind of touch upon some of the points that Bill made, especially around this idea of a master plan. And Greg was the champion around this concept. It was just really interesting that we had very diverse perspectives in the room, which was great because it brought in different values to this one piece of property, but we also quickly realized that we can't determine these uses on a case-by-case basis. They need to be embedded in this bigger picture, which ideally includes all these different perspectives. So I'm encouraged, and I hope that you agree with kind of this temporary use plan until a master plan can be put in place. The last kind of full-scale downtown master plan that was done was the Capital District Master Plan from 2000. And if you haven't had a chance to look at that, it's super interesting, and I sent it to Jack. There's a lot of projects that come to fruition, and a lot of projects that are on the cusp of happening, that are in there. And that's just a really great kind of base copy. We can update that and integrate sustainability goals, economic development goals, all these different things that right now are with that group, we're trying to parse out, again, with this one small piece of land. So I'm hoping we can kind of get to that bigger picture and then start to implement these things on different properties in a very cohesive way.
Thank you. Rosie?
Can I just clarify, Bill? So you said $150,000 to go back and do the original. I'm a little confused because looking at the current, the suggested plan, it looks like it would still allow us to go and put break off a lot and have a building there.
It will, but, and Corey, you're gonna have to save me here, buddy. But once we've created it, then we still have to go back in and put in pavement. I think there's some drainage things that have to be done. You've got, other connections to do. So if we do it all right now while we've got the contractor there, it's one cost. If we then build something else, even though we're doing it I think the most efficient way we can, there's still gonna be cost to come back, mobilize a contractor back to do the work and undo some of what we've done. I mean, I think it's the least disruptive thing we could come up with, but it's not free to then put it back, so.
But it would still be somewhat changed from the prior plan because the road is in a slightly different location.
It is, but the road goes through where all the pavement was going to go.
Uh-huh.
So the road's gonna be pavement, so it would, it could still be expanded. We might have to redo the base to deal with the sloping and that kind of thing, but the road could be moved once.
I guess
I'm not really explaining that
I'm
very
not
well.
really, but the advantage I see of this plan is that it actually would allow us to potentially still have a lot on the front part of the space, a building
Correct.
lot, while still having more park space on the back of
So,
the lot.
so there's, right.
And
So-
that more park space is not,
So one option,
Hang on, I want you to be able to finish your thought. What were you saying?
so when we say if we were to go back to the original plan, we wouldn't be talking about taking that additional park space on the back of the lot and paving that over. We would just be talking about separating off the front of the lot and selling that as a building lot.
right, so those are actually two different plans. So yes, the cost to go back to the original plan is to do exactly what we were going to do, which was pave further back.
Yeah.
So that's correct. We could potentially just leave it the way it is, put the building in the building lot and have the expanded green space in the back. One of the things we don't know about that is how, if that number of parking spaces makes a building viable. That's one of the things that needs to be looked at in the future. The cost for the 150 is, just to be clear about that, is to actually go back to the exact plan we were going to build in the first place. So you're right, that would be an expansion of paved space.
So in the scenario that a building was still viable with fewer parking spaces
Then
and
it
we
wouldn't-
wanted
we'd
to
just-
sell the lot, it would just be,
Correct.
it
I think
wouldn't
that's
cost
right.
more.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps.
Connor, and then Elizabeth, did you want to say something? Okay, we'll go Elizabeth and Connor. Oh, interesting.
Anyway, I just want to say ditto. The process was a really good one, so thank you. And I think we handled a very complicated scenario, situation quickly and productively. And I think it's a good lesson for us to remember as we move ahead into the planning process with the planning commission.
Great, thank you.
I may have missed it, Bill, the 18 temporary spots, are they metered?
They can be. Our group got really more into the design of the space. I think that would be a policy decision for us. I think the impetus, Rosie had asked me also about why we came up with 18, and there's no magic to that number other than we have 18 new housing units going into North Branch, which are using up to 18 spaces in that parking lot. So we thought at the very least if we can replace those. There was also some notion that if we took out parking on Berry Street to put in a bike lane, that's 17 or 18 spaces. So we kind of hovered around that as a number that was important to maintain in light of other activity. I personally would assume that they would be metered or permit spaces, like they would kind of be an extension of the parking lot out back, but to be determined.
Do you know how much that generates then, if it was metered?
I bet we could find that out. I don't. We do have a revenue projection of how much each meter brings in. So yes, there would be some revenue from this for parking.
Rosie, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure that I'm following clearly. I'm hearing master plan, and we just went through a process of talking about when we were going to do the master plan. Are these the same master plan, or is this a different downtown master planning process versus a?
It would.
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Yay.
So, about a month ago, we received a municipal planning grant to do the state streetscape master plan. And that, there was $25,000 that we received to do this. When these discussions started evolving, I believe Mike was at that meeting as well. The idea was we might be able to expand the scope of that planning grant to include not just the streetscape, but to start to look at municipal properties that were controlled or leased adjacent to that area. I spoke to the state and they said, yeah, they can do it. They didn't promise more money, but we're working on that. So the idea is that if we've already engaged with a consultant, which is going to be a landscape designer, an urban planner, design firm, that's kind of an ideal time because you're engaging with the public to look at kind of the right-of-way, and to just look at the adjacent areas will kind of give us that economies of scale when we've already engaged them. So I've actually got the RFQ ready to go. We just have to review it, and we're hoping to get that engaged. But it is separate from our town master plan. This is a downtown master plan,
Although,
which we've talked about.
just to be clear about this, so yes, so the idea was do a state and made, and it just a little off track, but just a reminder, one of the reasons we're doing a State Street master plan is because at some point we're going to have to replace the bridge. Once the Rialto Bridge, and so when we do that, we want to have a plan for what, while the street's closed, what is it going back as? So we're trying to look ahead to that. But the idea being is that, you know, we have the transportation, the Montpelier in Motion plan, which talks about different bike lanes. We have all these different plans. So as we do the master plan through the planning commission, is they will look at these sub-plans and take them all and develop those into a master plan. Because some of them, of course, have conflicting ideas, some are complementary ideas. And so how do you, and many of those groups were represented in this conversation. So I think that the idea is to lay out these segments and then have the planning commission look at them to create a whole.
So, any other comments? So my understanding is that we could use a motion, something to the effect of, oh, I have lost it. I used to have it. I know, it's like right here, Hedwig. So to some kind of a motion to pursue the plan, the interim plan as presented, and
I'll make a motion. Oh, I was gonna read them.
yeah, you go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
I'm
a
gonna
little
move
behind
something
here.
totally.
What you say is so good to me, Rosie.
Anything I say. I move that we direct the city manager to pursue an interim solution which will retain long-term options for either building or parking, open space, or some combination of both. And additionally, direct the city manager to conduct a planning process which considers various needs and land uses throughout the downtown, using the suggestions that what was this group called?
Our city
The
managers working
City
group.
managers working group came up with as a basis for this work.
Okay, and
Second.
so it's, all right. So just to reiterate, so this is the plan that we want for the interim, and we're going to conduct a further planning process about what should be there long-term. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Awesome,
Thank you, Laura and
yeah.
Elizabeth. Appreciate you coming.
Okay, so now we are skipping the zoning fixes. It's Mike Miller was not
Kevin
able
wants
to
do 'em.
join us. We're talking about revolving loan fund?
Yes.
Okay. Turn it
Unless
over to
Kevin
you.
wants to do zoning.
I do not want to touch zoning. Mike is, that's all Mike. So the issue tonight is the loan fund reorganization. Since the 1980s, the city has managed and maintained a number of revolving loan funds that are in your memo. Most of these are a result of community development block grant funds, which were lent to certain projects and then went back into repayment. The challenge has been with these revolving loan funds is that many of them were solutions to problems in the 80s or 90s. And as a result, when we try to apply these to existing issues, we don't really have the flexibility. So as a result, many of these loan funds are dormant, and they accrue a modest amount of interest a year, but not a significant amount. And the plan has been is to say, let's realign these with our existing goals. So a couple years ago, we did the Economic Development Strategic Plan. And one of the suggestions in there was, let's start looking to find a way to create, loan programs and policies which are flexible, but also are valuable. What does a small business need in order to be successful? How can we work with the banks to best leverage these funds? And so, actually, just recently, we had Laura and Mike and I met with one of the local commercial bankers to have a discussion on what is one of the best ways that we can do this. So he offered some great suggestions, and one of the things that we're hoping to do is to kind of continue those discussions, to have a kind of a roundtable of lenders and local business people, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and say, what is it you need? Because our existing business loan fund, for example, has restrictions that say things like you can't have any access to existing credit, which could include credit cards. So back in the 1980s, when nobody had credit cards, or not as many people, so basically we would be lending to people who are in such dire straits that no one would give them money. your business is probably gonna fail. So, again, we haven't written many of these loans recently, mainly since like the 90s. So, the goal is to actually take this, to redirect some of these funds into one economic development fund. What we're asking for tonight, specifically with each of these, housing, economic development, and the ADA fund, is to direct the city manager and direct staff to start having those substantive discussions, to come back with a series of policies and guidelines which are developed with the business community, for example, for the Economic Development Fund. We're shifting some of the other money into a separate housing revolving loan fund. And this is a result of, we have programs which I think need to be looked at by the Housing Task Force to say, you know, how effective are they? How can we best use these monies that are sitting in these accounts that are repayments from loans, from specifically housing preservation grant loans. Some of the funds come from CDBG funds for housing projects. So one of the things that we're looking at is to say, let's relook at our programs so that they align with our housing goals. How do we create new units? You know, do we have a rehab program? Is it duplicative because there are other agencies which do it? How do we best use our time and resources? So we've actually, I brought a version of this memo to the Housing Task Force to get their input on it. And just recently, Polly has offered to, you know, if approved, to kind of go in this reorganization direction. She's one person who's already volunteered to help work on these guidelines so that we can come up with programs. And it's kind of a really good timing. Coming up, actually, I think at the next council meeting, we have a proposal for a program which, a pilot program to do accessory dwelling units. And it's a very exciting program, really exciting. If you own a home, like, it's good stuff. So but one of the challenges that we look into is that we need to come up with the matches. So, you know, we're working with other partners at the state housing authority and Vermont Community Development Program to start to see like where we can leverage some of these local funds, and this would be one of those examples. And that's another example of saying, okay, let's make these funds more flexible. Still gonna have council approval, but make these more flexible, and then, you know, when these opportunities arise, we have the opportunity to go after these projects and programs flexibly and quickly, because I think that's gonna be the key.
So I think this is great. I think this is, it's somehow shocking to me that we have these balances that are really not being used. And so if we can make that more effective and working for the city, that is wonderful. One of the questions I have about this is, so in the chart that you gave us, it says, you know, there's the rightmost column, intended purpose / restrictions. So I'm sure you've thought through this, but I just need to check in about it. Some of this money, it sounds like came through grants or whatever, and they would have their own set of restrictions on them. And I assume that the restrictions that are here may be a combination of restrictions that the council placed on those, or the restrictions that came with the grant itself.
Correct. So some of these funds are self-imposed restrictions. So like I can go through this really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, before you do that, my question is, I just want to make sure that we have the authority to revamp the guidelines.
We do. We in order to do this, we just have to go to the state that we annually report on the existing funds. Although we're pretty low, we're down to only really one or two that we actually report on. And we just get a release. And generally speaking, what they're looking for is, with the reorganization of revolving loan funds, is, okay, you know, what's your plan to do with these balances? In some of these cases, you know, we've been in so many generations of repayment that even under the original grant agreement, we're not really under the restrictions. they're essentially our own restrictions at this point.
Okay.
So there's going to be a conversation with the state, and that's one of the pieces in this request on the last page, is just to authorize us to go through that process and close out those remainders with the state.
Okay.
So
Great.
I'd like to make a motion to direct city manager, staff, and committees to prepare an updated guidelines for each of the proposed loan funds and to present updated guidelines and procedures for the council approval over the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Second.
I love how efficient you are, team. We're doing great. Okay.
Is the information, it's like,
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Seems wonderful. Okay, so on to the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee charge. I know we have a couple folks, co-chairs from the committee here.
Hi.
Welcome.
I'm Julia Shavitz. I'm a co-chair of the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee.
Peter Kalman, co-chair.
Do you want to introduce the topic, or do you want me to do that? Either way.
You can do it.
Okay, so we were charged, or we were asked to help the committee clarify what their charge was. And so we have a document that I think you all sort of either came up with or have had some input on, right? As a draft for the charge for this committee. And I think there's lots of great stuff in here. So do you want to talk at all about the thinking that your committee has done around your charge and
Yeah.
how you came to this point, or?
Yeah, so I will say that that charge is modeled on charges from other city committees, just to looking at the structure and substituting in where we felt we could be successful and needed to address as a committee. It's in the work, and since we formed as a committee, it's become clear that that having a clear charge is going to be really critical to pulling in the same direction and making change and making headway on these issues. And so the charge that I sent to you, that you have now, was not created by the full committee. It was sort of drafted based on the Energy Committee's charge. And then I had individual meetings with folks, and we kind of worked on it individually. So the whole committee has not but everyone has looked at it and everybody has weighed in on it, and I think will set us up well. The other thing I want to say about it is that there's the kind of official charge part, and then the second piece of the document where there's some bullet points on the second half is more focused on, it's more about specific activities that we would take on, and maybe not all at once, maybe not all in our first year of existence, but the things that we can imagine making headway on.
Great. Yeah, that's great. And so you had written me an email too
Yes.
about just some vision
Yes.
process.
So the other thing that became really clear in our last meeting, we had really broad consensus with everybody at the meeting that we were lacking a shared vision, and it seems like the city in general is lacking a shared vision and understanding of what is the current status of social and economic justice in our community, and possibly even what are the definitions of those terms, and where is it now and where are we heading? And that amassing such a vision, I'm sure other people are having these conversations in various ways. Other organizations are having them at various scales and sizes, at the state level, at the community level, at the Central Vermont level, but that having it specifically about Montpelier needs to happen and needs to be an important first, that we can't start making policy recommendations until we have a shared vision of where are we now and where do we all want to be, and that it really does need to be a broad community conversation that is as inclusive as possible, both of experts in the fields that touch on that are working on these issues, as well as individuals and groups that are affected. So that is what we are kind of starting to look at, or sort of proposing that our first 12 to 18 months of work from, I guess not our first, but our next 12 to 18 months of work be focused around really not making specific broad policy recommendations, but really on amassing this vision, and with the hope that eventually we will be able to make competent policy recommendations as a result.
Super. Any comments, questions? No? Okay. Yes, Donna?
Just a supplement. I got invited to a local neighborhood group of 12 people, and we've committed ourselves to become more self-aware of, one, Black Lives Matter as an organization. Saw a wonderful but short video of the 3 women who founded it, and their interview and discussion, very expansive. And having been in women conscious raising groups in the 70s, yes, you weren't born then.
True.
Some
It's
of us
true.
were.
I know, barely, Bill. But anyway, I would be really interested if we could actually start generating a lot more of those. But one of the things I brought was to share with you and ask maybe Bill to share. There are some things of the 6 core things of Black Lives Matters, and some resources in Burlington and Vermont that I give to Bill, and you can share electronically. But we're going to actually start reading some books and some articles and see some documentatives, and I'm going to share as I go along, hoping that everybody can go on their personal journey as we then look to apply this knowledge to our policies.
That's great.
So I'll feed whatever I have into you if you can use it.
Yeah, that'd be
But
great.
I do think we have to do our own personal homework as well as in the community, sharing that, what we don't know and what
Yeah.
we need to know.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And
Excellent,
I'll give
thank
this
you.
to you later, Bill.
Connor?
Quick question, does the current composition of the committee reflect, I think, the diversity that you'd like to have, or do you think that needs to be a component of it too, sort of recruiting some new committee members with different backgrounds? Is that
Yeah,
sort
I think we could use some more diversity among the committee. I think we've actually, the 2 newest members have added diversity in terms of perspective and agency connections, which I think is really great. And yes, we need to grow. I also would say that in my I mean, we've started to talk about this, but in my personal vision of this committee, that we also will need to rely on work. We'll need to, this is going to need to be a community lift, and so we will need to rely on work that's already being done by folks in the community, but also, volunteers that come on for a project at a time, that aren't folks who are going to take on joining the committee and staying on for the long haul, but ad hoc as needed. And so I also hope that that's another place we can gain some diversity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we need a motion on the charge.
I move that we approve it.
Second.
Okay, great, we have a second. Go ahead, Peter.
I just, I want to make sure that we have the flexibility over time to change the charge.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, if you wanted to change the charge, you'd probably have to come back to the council, but that is an option.
Yeah, because I think as we reach out into the community and hear from a broader range of voices in the community, we're going to have some disagreement about even a word. And that disagreement will be actually important to helping us understand social and economic justice better. So that I think a year from now, we probably could rewrite the charge in a way that would be the result of what we've learned. And I just want to make sure that this isn't written in stone.
No, for sure. That's fine. I also hope that whatever is, here, or whatever you find you might need to change it to, is empowering enough to your group to do the work that you want to do. And in all honesty, I hope that is the focus more so than changing these words.
But that's that's exactly why I wanted to say that, because in our, I can't remember if it was our first meeting or our second meeting, or both of them, we got so hung up on the words
go ahead and get to the work.
Yes.
It's great. It's important work, needs to happen, so,
Thank you.
thank you. There's a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Both, yeah. And thank you to your committee as well. Please pass that on.
Will do.
Okay, the recreation feasibility study.
They are not here.
They're not here. Interesting.
They are, well, no, they actually are having a public presentation tonight at 6, and so they're coming from that to here.
So we should just skip
They
it.
had
and-
actually, they had asked us to put it later in the agenda. We just are moving along so rapidly.
Yeah, I'm anticipating, I want to be done by 9:30.
Okay, well,
I'm
that
just
should be easy.
Well, because we have some executive sessions, so I want to be
Yeah,
done
this
with,
still should hopefully go in.
done with the public session at 9:30. That's my
Well,
goal.
the public's, we should be done by
We're going to be done sooner than that, yeah.
You guys are jinxing the whole thing.
Rosie
Find out
just
what they're
went
at.
to the bathroom, I think, so she's not here for the public message board. So we're going to jump to the community indicators. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that's yours.
That's mine. We can talk about that. Okay, so it's been a little while since we talked about the community indicators. The color coding, in case it's confusing here, the red items were things that we added as a result of the conversation that we had the last time. Some of the suggestions, it turned out, were not terribly feasible, or they were the kinds of data that we didn't think anybody was collecting, we didn't know of anybody was collecting. But there were a lot of great suggestions, and so a lot of those ended up being added in to this list. Now, if there are other things that you see that are still absent, that is perfectly fine, and would love to continue to have those conversations. In a certain sense, this is even still basically a first draft. This is our first run at community indicators. They may yet change as we go to actually reporting on them. But hopefully they're the kind of thing that would be useful and some good data for other folks. So just so you know, Rosie, we skipped down to community indicators. Okay. Yeah, any comments or questions about the list as it stands?
I had a couple, and I
Yeah.
can't remember what they were. I remember. Under environmental stewardship, a bunch of these, I would suggest would be more useful if they were percentages rather than numbers.
Okay.
Because a lot of these things like vehicle miles traveled and number of single occupancy trips per week, if our population grows, which we are hoping that it will, those will go up. And then we would have an indicator that showed that we were failing when actually we might be doing better.
That's a great call.
So to reframe those in terms of percentages.
That's excellent. Thank you. Donna, then Connor?
Do you actually have a color code indicator with this chart somewhere?
Yeah, so
I can
this.
remember what they are? when you're not
Yeah,
there?
so I have this in a Google spreadsheet that is color coded. This is, you're sort of seeing the, like, behind the curtain a little bit as to how I think, and, thinking in terms of color coding things. But yes, that does live there. Sorry, so it's, yeah.
Okay, so on my link, I don't have it, but it's on the website?
It's on the website, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Connor?
So I think I mentioned it last time, I'm still not really down with including some of these school test scores. I think it sort of feeds into the notion of people teaching to the test.
Yep.
Which I don't consider an indicator of how well our students are doing here.
That seems fair.
I want
So
our teachers to be able to throw a frisbee to teach like physics, if they want to.
it's just all too apt.
Oh, brown nose.
I don't know anybody who throws frisbees. Okay, so are you suggesting like the SBAC scores or SATs? That I'm happy to remove that. Thoughts on that, team? One note on that is that there's going to be this school report card from the AOE that may
Might
be.
include it.
Yeah, well, it might include, but that might be sort of serving the same purpose without, getting at the socioeconomic sort of bias that's inherent there. Yeah.
I'm not sure that I agree with getting rid of that. I agree that it's a partial and imperfect measure, but it is something that people can look at and compare Montpelier to other places. But I guess I wouldn't sign on to just ditching it.
I'll tell you, I don't have strong feelings about it. It's on there because I know the school keeps track, and they publish that data, so it would be very easy to access. But, so, either way, what's your pleasure, team?
I'm with Connor on that. If it's available elsewhere, then that's fine. We can provide a link to it, but I just feel like those numbers, they don't mean what everyone ascribes to them.
Other thoughts on that? Go ahead, Donna.
Well, just, if you take that one, are you taking all the ones that have a score or a grade associated with it? Because a lot of them do have some sort of a grade rating. Is it just one line you want to take out? Or is it all the lines that refer to any kind of a score or school rating?
No. SBAC and the SAT?
Just the SATs one you want to remove?
And SBAC.
SBAC?
And SBAC, okay.
Yeah. What do you think, Glenn?
I'm not sure I have a strong opinion.
Okay.
I think I'm leaning with Jack. If people are measuring it, we might as well include it.
What do you think, Rosie?
People can make up their own minds.
I don't feel strongly, I guess it depends on how we're presenting this. This is a data point that somebody can look at and ascribe whatever meaning they want to it, I guess. If we are measuring our success based on that, then I guess it would be a different matter.
You know, what we could do potentially, team, is we could actually just take them both, so the school is going to publish its own data. We could just have a link to the school, and that's their responsibility. What do you think about that? Should we just, is that okay?
Yeah,
All right, so let's just, we'll just have a link to the school's publishing of their, whatever data they think is most relevant.
So are you saying that for all the public
Well,
school?
I
lines?
think, actually, to be fair, that would apply to anything that says Nancy Fitzgerald. Those are all pieces of data that the school points to. And honestly, that's less that we need to maintain on an individual basis, so it would actually just be easier if we could say, interested in school data, go here.
Great,
Yeah. So,
good plan.
does that sound okay?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, great. Any further comments? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So, Laura Gephardt, Montpelier Development Corporation. I just would press pause because I sat in this awesome presentation earlier this week, I believe, for our Access Montpelier. And from what I'm hearing with these data points, you're trying to tell a story about each of these areas, or subject areas, correct? Or,
Goal areas?
yeah.
They're under
right.
the big headings of goals, yeah,
Yeah,
or
so
values or something.
with this, with ArcGIS Hub, this provides you the capability to tell these stories and gather thousands of data points that allows you to compare to other communities, allows you to do, all these different things. So I would caution, don't keep it limited to just these data points. Maybe instead get to what are you trying to answer with these? Are you trying to inform the community, tell the story about how is our school system performing? That tool has that capability. So rather than having these people try to give you numbers, every quarter or so, that might just be an easier solution and provides much more robust data, and maybe gets closer to what you're trying to accomplish with these indicators.
So one thought is that, so this is sort of draft one, and I think the plan would be to take these and see how we would be plugging them into the Invisio software. And I think the goal certainly is to tell a story, hopefully have this inform the community about who we are, and, I'm certainly interested in that. And so I see that as like a next phase, right? So, supposing we approve these indicators, then, really the next phase is to say, okay, so how do they either interface with, Access Montpelier or Invisio or both? And I actually am gonna guess that we may have yet another round of tweaking them, but this is just are we ready to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna explain my understanding, and, this is your initiative, so I don't wanna
Go for it.
mansplain.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
But I think the idea is we lay out some specific criteria for the community. These aren't necessarily things that the city does or doesn't do, maybe the meals, and that it's just the kind of thing we can see statically year after year, like how's our student health risk assessments going, how are our home sales going, those kinds of things. It's just stuff we would have, and once a year maybe update and say, and then so over a period of time, we could draft that. I think there's like you're saying, there's a huge opportunity to bring other things in or integrate this in, but I saw this as just something that's it's in some ways intended to just be informative for us, and then as the city council might look at it year in, year out, or after 5 years and say, whoa, we're really slacking here, maybe we should then enact a program or bring up, do something about it, as opposed to, oh, this is just happening.
Yeah,
Does that help clarify?
totally.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out, because I sat down with David Healy and geeked out over this. And right now, with your current license, you have access to 3,000 some data points. You have access to all these indicators. It's just pulling the report. So just wanting you to think through what's the easiest process, instead of having individuals kind of dole out these different data points.
I wouldn't.
And maybe looking at what's all in that system, and I don't know. So just
No,
wanted
that's
to-
great. One of the, a potential modification to the recommended action could be, because the recommended action right now is just adopt community indicators. It could be adopt community indicators and direct city staff to, explore,
Best
other.
way to prevent them or something.
Yeah, the best way to present them or compare them. Yes.
Peter Kelman.
Oh, sorry, hang on one second.
This is not working. Can you please sit at the table? Apologize.
Sorry, okay. Peter Kelman. Speaking for myself and in a way, for the Social and Economic Justice Committee, I think it is important, and I'm kind of at a handicap because I haven't seen the indicators, but it is important, I think, to look carefully at the indicators to be sure that there aren't any biases or biased uses that could be made of some of the indicators. So I think the point about that you can tell us a story, you can tell a bunch of different stories, and a bunch of different people can tell a bunch of different stories. I think Bill's idea that this is actually a document to help you track and decide and discuss, that's great. The dirty laundry, the potentially dirty laundry's in here. But when you start to put out stuff that can lead other people to say, aha, you see, and tell the story that they want. So I just think we need to be a little mindful of how this could be used.
That's fair, and, certainly open to suggestions there, so.
So is this available for others to see?
Yeah, it's online.
Okay, I will take it.
Do you have more comments?
I just want to make one comment.
Yeah,
which is
please.
that I don't see anything on there, I'm Julia Shafis, I don't see anything on there tracking anything having to do with racial or ethnic makeup of the city.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't know, I don't know where what your sources of data are for this, or if that's been considered yet.
Census could be.
But the other thing that I've been hearing a little bit more about recently is both folks leaving the city because people of color in particular, leaving the city because they don't feel comfortable, or folks visiting and not feeling comfortable, even relative to other Vermont towns. So I think that's something for the city to have an eye on.
I think that's worth checking on, like, I feel like we had that conversation, I'm not sure what's not on this list, but so.
There's population by age group, race, gender, and disability.
Oh, okay.
I think there are more data points that we could put in there to capture what you're talking about.
Yeah, fair enough, thank you. Jack?
When you mentioned, well, all the lines that include, that are saying, talk to Nancy Fitzpatrick
Yep.
for, one of those is down below, and it's the percentage of children on free and reduced meals,
Mhm.
which I think is very important not to take that out of there. I'm remembering a couple of years ago hearing hearing Rebecca Holcomb speak, and she said, "Your prosperity is tied to the most vulnerable child in your community."
So maybe we want to call that one
So-
out particularly?
So keep that, yeah.
Okay, we'll keep that one. Okay. Great. Noted. Glenn?
Just one question about, it looks to me like under public health and safety, the newly added ones are sourced, but the older ones are not sourced. Am I misreading that?
I'm not sure why that is. I'd have to get back to you on
Okay,
as to
not
why,
worried,
but that's a
just
good question.
Checking.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't see anything under public health and safety about fires.
Just number of fires.
Am I just missing it?
We do report that regularly.
I think I'm
fires,
just
ambulance calls,
missing it on there.
Well, let's put it on there. Okay. And again, this is, that we can absolutely tweak it later on, that's perfectly fine. If there's any, I know people are reading, reading through them.
Those colored things are a little hard to see.
Oh, sorry about that. Is there any further? Yes? Please do. It's good.
Under public health and safety, I wonder about police complaints or complaints against police behavior, or if there's any way, or civilian oversight of police in any way, like to track that.
Is that something the police department keep
I
track
think
of?
so, yeah.
Great, thank you.
I'm also wondering about children in state custody, if that's data. I'm pretty sure that is available through DCF,
Mhm.
but that can be an indicator of community health as well.
Okay.
And then the other thing, I don't know that I saw anything about substance abuse.
It's drug, right? Opioids aren't mentioned.
Under public health and safety, there's a couple. A measurement of drug use in Montpelier.
But we don't
and-
include alcohol in that, and I think,
Should we do that?
I think that's important.
I'm trying to find the line here.
It's like halfway down, it's underneath hate crime data.
Oh, measurement of drug use.
Drug and alcohol.
Drug and alcohol, okay. And again, we'll just have to see, it may, evolve as to like exactly how we're reporting that, but
But service providers in the area may have to report on that anyway, population served and.
yeah. Okay. All right, Jack?
I include myself in this of having been bad at not really putting time into thinking about this. The nature of this kind of discussion is that once you get into it, you can immediately think of 5 other things that aren't listed that should be, and so it might be useful to set ourselves a date to review it again and come up with more suggestions, maybe with a tickler going out to the council in advance of that.
Well, so since this is our second time reading through it, I mean, I guess what I would suggest is that we implement something and that we continue to think about it and adjust it, because you're right, we could, we could just talk about indicators for.
We find this forever.
Yeah, forever, right? Like, it could go on indefinitely. And, you know, and over time, the things that we care about and things that we want to track might change, or they probably should change. So my hope is that, you know, while this list is probably imperfect, I would like to start, I would rather start collecting, or not necessarily collecting data, but start saying, all right, this is what we're going to try to do, and then adjust it. But we should have what I'm hearing from your comment is that maybe we should plan to review the indicators once a year. And it might actually make some sense to do that, you know, early with the new council, to say, these are the things that we have been tracking. Do you want to make adjustments? Rosie?
I think it would also be useful to send this out to the committees who deal with these areas and say, you know, take a look. Do you have any suggestions for better indicators or other things that we're not covering? Because we do have a bunch of committees that are really focused on all of these different issues.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it would make sense maybe even to, because we're going to be inviting other committees in our our yearly strategic planning session, that would be a great time to do that potentially. Just thinking out loud. But in the meanwhile, I would love to, if there's a motion to adopt these and direct the city manager to adjust as needed.
I'll move to adopt the community indicators as amended tonight.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Great, thank you all. Looking forward to this data. And speaking of data, sorry? Yes, exactly. Speaking of data, we're going to go back to the recreation feasibility study, which had a lot of data. That was great. How are y'all doing, team? Do we need a break? Are you feeling good? Yes? A break would be good?
We
So-
need to set up anyways.
Fantastic. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and you all can set up. We'll be back. passed
Two
around here.
half-year terms.
I think those are from Glenn. Oh, dear God. So, all right.
So we'll introduce ourselves.
Yes, welcome, and as we're coming back from our break, please introduce yourselves.
Marty McMullen, Recreation Director.
Sue Allen, Assistant City Manager.
Ken Ballard, Ballard King and Associates.
Chris Hancock, citizen.
I'm going to turn this over to Ken and let him walk you through the various proposals and the survey. I just want to remind you all that where this started was concern over the existing rec center, which is not ADA compliant. It needs work. There are code violations. So we're sort of starting from the assumption that doing nothing is not an option. That's kind of where our placeholder. And it also adds a certain urgency to doing this work, because we can't let that center just hang out there forever. So with that as the background, I've also asked Ken to be short, but he has tons of data to show you. So ask any question and it's in here. He can answer it. So Ken.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor and members of council. As Sue indicated, I'm going to kind of cut to the chase on this pretty quickly and show you kind of the back end of this. And again, if there's other information that you want to see or work with, we can bring that up. But we're going to kind of make this short and sweet. Just a little bit about Ballard King and Associates. We've been around for almost 27 years. We're a recreation planning firm. We specialize in recreation center work. We've done over 700 projects across 49 states, have about 200 facilities, mostly public facilities open around the country. Done over 25 projects in New England, kind of a list of some of the more recent ones that we've done. So this is what we do, and been having a lot of fun working on your project up to this point. Real quickly, the parameters of our study. This is an indoor community center, rec/recreation center study. That's what we've been focusing on. Our tasks are market analysis, which is understanding the demographics not only of Montpelier, but also of a larger market area. Understanding who is currently providing services, whether they're public, nonprofit, or for-profit. Doing community input, a series of focus groups. We've had 11 different focus groups over 2 different occasions going back to October. Community meetings, we just finished the second one here right before this meeting. And then a statistically valid survey that was done in November and December. So where we sit is the next one, which is the project options, and what we're going to talk about here tonight. So the first two, the market and the community input, really kind of inform us on where we think the project could go, and we're going to share some options with you. Once we get some direction, we'll be doing some operational impacts on the direction that the project may go. Also explore a little bit more on the partnership side. So what do we see coming out of this as kind of the issues for the project? Well, if the question is what to build. Is it a new center? Is it rehabbing the existing Berry Street Recreation Center? Kind of, as Sue indicated, doing nothing really isn't an option for you. If you do build a new facility, where do you build it? Is it downtown? Is it on the edge of town? Or is it some other location that may be out of town? Who are the potential partners? And we've started to work on identifying potential partners for the project and where we are. Clearly, one of the biggest questions for any project of this nature is, how do you fund this from a capital perspective, and how do you operate it? What are the financial implications of both of those? And ultimately, what amenities do we need to include in the facility? And this is even going back to the rehabbing option that says, what do we get out of that, and what would be potentially in a new facility? And ultimately, how do we move forward, and which way do we move forward? So these are some of the questions that we're going to focus on, and we're looking for your input on as well. Clearly, as we present these kind of 3 options to you tonight, we want to understand what the right option is to meet the needs of this community, but also fitting within the financial realities that are always present in a project of this nature. And really, what does the center need to contain, and what does it need to have to meet community needs? And this is community needs not only today, but looking out into the future. So let's talk about the three options that we've kind of put together for this project, and there's kind of two sub-options under the first one. These are not in any particular priority order or recommendation. This is just kind of laying it out there. The first one is just saying we're going to rehab the existing Berry Street Recreation Center. One of the options is to sit there and say, we're going to do the minimal amount of improvements, the code improvements, the ADA access issues, but that's really it. So you basically have an improved building, but it's what you have now. You're not getting any space out of it. It'll be, meet the requirements, but you're not really getting anything more than what you currently have now. The second option is to take it further, do all of the things that are in the first piece there, but now also allow use of the basement area, which is not currently in use because of access issues and other things, as well as the second floor, which both have usable space potentially if they're remodeled. Obviously, that one we actually gain space, and how that's utilized, how it's used for recreation purposes can be determined, but you're getting something more than what you have now. It's within the footprint of the building. We really don't have the ability with the site limitations to go outside of the existing structure of the building, but it's what we'd be doing inside of that. The second one is deciding, well, what we really need to do, and we can't fit it or really use the existing recreation center, but we're going to build a new recreation center with the components and pieces that the people have identified as being important for the facility, and what we heard during the community input process. And then the last one is a combination of the first two. Build a new center and keep the Berry Street Center. Obviously, you'd have to do improvements to Berry Street, and you'd also be committed to build a new facility. So those are the three options. I'm going to kind of take you through these in a little bit more detail in terms of what we kind of basically see as basic pros and cons and some really preliminary cost information. So, rehabbing the existing Berry Street Recreation Center. What are the pros? Well, it's a lower cost. You have an existing building that's there. Yes, we have to do a lot to renovate that and bring it up to code and make improvements, but there is an existing building. It's in town. It's walkable. People told us in the community meetings, and it came out real high in the survey, that walkability was important. It certainly supports that. Because it's lower cost, it's a little easier to fund. We really see this as being a city of Montpelier project in this regard, that you would take on really the responsibility, much like you do now for that facility. The cons really are not going to be able to add a lot of new amenities. Again, we're kind of dictated by the site limitations and the building limitations. Things like a swimming pool really aren't possible at that site. And the reason I put that in here is the pool came out as the #1 priority coming out of the survey in terms of what people wanted to see. Not unusual. That's always a pool. Indoor pool's almost always in the top 3, oftentimes the top #1 or #2. But we're limited in really being able to do that with using the Berry Street Center. Other partnerships are also limited. There's a number of things you can do there. There's pretty limited, so it's hard to bring in any real, what we call equity partners that are going to put potentially dollars into the project itself. And certainly the issue of lack of parking. If we do the full kind of renovation expansion of the center where we're getting that basement and that upper level to work and provide new space, we'd expect the utilization rate for that facility to increase pretty dramatically. Well, when we do that, we're going to have more people coming. Do we have the ability to park them, to get them into the facility? Certainly the fact that we're in town and have the walkability issue helps with that. But, you're going to get a lot more use out of that. So that's another potential issue. Cost to do this, the minimal one, which is just code implications and everything else, could be $2 to maybe $3 million. And these are pretty, just very general cost estimates. We are not an architectural firm. We're not a capital cost estimating. This is a little bit out of our bailiwick. When we move further along with this, we will try to nail this down a little more through utilizing some of the services of people that can do that. But anyway, there's going to be a certain level of cost associated with that. The improved side of that could push that up to $5 million by getting, again, those other 2 levels. So they're not cheap. And again, anytime we're talking about a renovation of a building of that age, There's so many unknowns, it's always a little bit of a concern, and you carry a huge contingency just because you don't know what you're dealing with, do you really get into doing it? So that's kind of what it might be. Operational subsidy, when we say operation subsidy, that's the difference between costs of operation and revenue potential. It's what the net is, if you will, of what you're dealing with. Your subsidy level could go up by nothing if we're just doing the simple improvements to the building without adding space upstairs and downstairs. May not have much of any, maybe pick it up a little bit, potentially up to about $50,000 net increase in cost to the city. Do the full building improvement. Now we've got 2 extra floors. We're going to have 2 spaces that will be utilized for a number of functions. We would expect to be bringing in revenue in some program areas for that, but you'll still have a net cost increase to that, and that could be a pretty wide range right now. I think it'll be more on the lower end of that scale, but that remains to be seen.
What's the main driver of the improved, increased cost with subsidy or the operation subsidy?
Well, we're gonna have to heat and cool on a better basis those spaces than what you're doing now. We're gonna have to clean them. We're also gonna have programs and activities, so we have to pay instructors for those programs, have staff there to do that. So it's a kind of combination of all that stuff.
Great. Perfect, thank you.
So, news center. What are the pros on this? Well, it can be a full facility. We can, we're not limited by site. In fact, we would say that whatever you do on a news center, that we have to be looking for a site that would allow this to be supported. So that potentially could have aquatics, whether it's done in the first phase or later phase, and you would find a site where ultimately you could do a full build out even if it was in phases. So you can sit there and say the future of indoor recreation for the large part could be at this location. You potentially have more partners. You have more amenities. We also, as we'll talk about later, probably won't be downtown. So you may be able to bring more partners. And we say partners, we're really talking potentially equity partners, ones that are bringing dollars to the table. Because of the size and magnitude of the facility and adding aquatics, you're really taking on kind of a regional focus now. Before, the Berry Street facility is primarily what it is now. It's going to be really inward focused on your residents. This becomes now a much more regional facility by certainly the amenities it has and potentially even by where it's located. You would need to have improved access and parking. We'd have to find sites that would support that. Hopefully we'd still be able to get other forms of access in terms of everything from walking to trail access to biking, all of that. Cons, obviously we're talking about a much larger building, high cost to build, and you don't have an existing structure. You're probably starting from ground zero, so you're going to have to take on the full cost of building that building. It's likely not downtown, and by downtown I mean in the city core, and it's because of the size of the building, parking and other requirements. Finding that kind of property or purchasing property to do that, probably not likely. Wouldn't say it's impossible, but not likely. And the reality is, as we get to cost here in a minute, you're going to need an equity partner, somebody else putting money into this project. Capital cost depends upon what you're doing, the size and magnitude, and a lot of it's driven by aquatics and whether you have that in the first phase and how big it is. And that could be anywhere from $12 to $20+ million. So it's a big price tag to do that. These are not cheap buildings to build. Operational subsidy, again, difference between expenses and revenues, the net cost, if you will, to whoever the operator is, anywhere from about $150,000 a year to maybe as high as $350,000 a year. So there is a subsidy involved with that, obviously. And then the third option, which now involves, again, keeping the Berry Street facility, would have to have some level of improvement to it, and building a new one as well. You get 2 facilities. Obviously, you would have those in different areas, serving different users. You would have potentially both a local focus and a regional draw. You'd have multiple types of uses, maybe by different locations, more opportunities in multiple locations. You just have more variety. This is the highest cost option on the con side. I mean, you're having to make improvements to your existing facility and you're building a new one. Also has the highest operating costs because we're subdividing the market. So we're having some folks that are going to one location for certain things, one to another. Some people will say, well, I don't need to go to that location because I can do that here. So it kind of divides up your market. That contributes to higher operating costs by 2 facilities and minimizes a little bit some of the revenue potential that's there. Cost implications, this one's a little harder because you're dealing with 2 of these things, but it's basically anywhere from 14 to 25 plus $1 million. And the subsidy now is about that $300,000 to $500,000 range. So that's kind of real quickly, if you will, the options. We're certainly interested in your input, your questions on which of these you would like to see us pursue. It may be some version that we don't have up there, but that's kind of where we sit. We kind of want some idea of how important you think different elements may be to occur to have in this facility. And again, you know, we can talk a bit about some of the project partnering aspects and those types of things as well. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Again, I'm prepared to talk about survey results if you need to, and other things as well. I have slides on those if you.
Yeah, we sent the survey out on Friday, so maybe you've looked at it and don't need that, but Ken is prepared to talk about the survey results if anybody would like more interest. He's also been talking to sort of equity partners in the region to gauge some interest of sort of the business community partnering with us on something like this.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by equity partners? Are these investors or are these businesses that would be providing services or somehow like doing something more than just paying for it?
It can be all of the above. It's but equity says they're actually putting dollars into the project, either capital and or operational dollars into that. Their level of involvement would depend on the partner. Some of them may want to simply say, for the public good, we're interested in doing that. And doing, others may say, we actually want to have some type of a presence in the building.
Can you give me are you talking like large employers or are you talking like an exercise company that wants to use the space? I'm just having a hard time understanding.
It's a higher level than that. It's some major businesses that may be willing to help fund the capital construction of the buildings. Some of the partners we've talked about that are a little more aligned with some of the purpose of the facility might actually want to go beyond just giving potentially dollars for the facility, but actually have a presence, and they would be a medical provider.
Okay.
Yes?
The Berry Street existing facility is in the designated TIF district, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And, okay. So in theory, that could be a public-private partnership. I know the city owns the building right now, right? But if, for example, we were to find an equity partner who was willing to put up significant amount of money, the city could in some way partner with them. Is that permitted with a TIF district? Or if the city sold the building to someone with an agreement that this is going to be used for this purpose?
I think it would be more that there was this would have to be an improvement that was related to a private investment. So let's say theoretically someone next door was putting in a health facility and this was going to be a public improvement next door. We might be able to use the TIF funds from that to help pay for this, but I'm not sure. We'd have to look at that. I don't know how on point that would be for a TIF. We'd have to see.
But so if like a nonprofit bought the space and then.
Well, we'd have to, I'd have to see what the link would be. What this was doing that was allowing the business to go in.
We've used TIF funding in other states for public centers. I don't know that there may be limitations we can do in Vermont, but
It's pretty strict in Vermont, what we can.
I think that might be something that's worth.
We'll look into that for you, Ashley.
I think the other issue is, to be honest with you, and we've kind of noted, I think you're gonna have big problems getting a equity partner actively involved in Berry Street, because I just don't know that there's enough there for a real partner to get much out of that unless they were gonna take it and use it for some other different purpose. But to actually, on the same level as saying we're gonna partner to develop or improve for a community purpose, I'm not sure there's gonna be much traction with that.
And then the other thing is, are there any like sites specifically that were looked at? I know we had talked last time about the possibility of holding open an option for the red zone, but I don't think that made it anywhere with the legislature.
We've floated site ideas. Redstone is now, assuming the papers have been signed, privately owned. That property's privately owned, and that would be a great location for it if that private owner would be willing to talk to us about it. We've looked at, I'm sort of dreaming here, so when people see it on TV, they don't need to panic, but National Life has some land. You come right off the interstate and head up to National Life. That might have some regional interest, or up by the hospital, or in town, maybe down even by the Elm Street Rec field with the pool, the outdoor pool there. So we're sort of keeping everything on the table, even talking about Sabin's Pasture or some land owned by the Vermont College of the Fine Arts.
We're probably looking for a site realistically that's, on the grander vision, at least where we sit right now, may need to be as large as 5 acres. And that would be to support not only the building, but also required parking and that type of thing. So it's not a small site. Now, there are ways to stack these things and others, but it's gonna be hard to do it. You might, big might, be able to do it on 3 acres. I've never really seen it done on less than that.
One of the survey results that's probably worth mentioning is, while people do want a pool and might want a new facility, we asked them if they're willing to pay for that through their taxes, and there was a little bit less enthusiasm when you asked that question. More than half seem to be either very willing or somewhat willing to renovate the existing facility.
I was going to ask
a tax
Ken
increase.
what his take, we all have our own local biases and preferences here, but you're the out-of-towner. What was your read of the survey results, and if there's a quick?
I actually was concerned that it would be far more negative than what it was. I was actually somewhat feeling a little bit better about this. I think there's reasonable, here's the question on basically improving Berry Street. And actually, that's reasonably strong. You have in both of these, you have huge numbers of maybe and not sure. And that's not unusual in a survey of this nature, because people go, I don't know. There's a whole lot of other questions,
Right.
that they need to answer. But that shows a willingness to at least look at that. You have a yes of 41. You even take half of those next two in the maybes and the not sures, you're there. And the no's are about almost a little more than half of the yeses. So I'm encouraged by that one. That's, that has a possibility of moving forward. And again, the key thing is getting those people that are in that unsure and maybe information that they ultimately need to make a decision. And so that, and compared to other projects, that's not too bad. This one, and part of it's the magnitude, is I would say it's not a non-starter, but it's certainly a much higher mountain to climb. Yes here is only 25%, and the maybes and not sure, and now because we're talking bigger dollar amounts, are huge numbers. We have over 40% in that category of, I don't know. And now the no number's gone up. So I wouldn't say, well, just forget it, but it's definitely going to take some work. Tell me what I'm getting. Tell me who else is participating in this. What we go. I think the other key thing that's in here, the 200 to 350 number does not get you to the full dollar amount to pay for the full center. That's not funding all of it. That's funding maybe 50%. So that's where we talk about the equity partner. This is going to be hard enough. This is going to get you maybe half, a little more than half of what you would need potentially. That's with the pool. You take the pool out of the equation, you're higher. But even then, I don't think you're going to fund it all from a tax number. So you're going to need other sources, and that's where we talk about the equity partner piece being pretty critical if you're going to move forward with this concept on the bigger standalone facility.
One of the things that I've been wondering about for as long as this conversation is going on is that it's privately owned, but we have a facility just a few miles up the road where there's a pool, there's indoor tennis, there's a lot of recreational opportunities, and I wonder why is that? How do we compete with that, or how will it make sense to to do this when First and Fitness is already up there?
Well, part of our market analysis was to understand who's there in the marketplace. A facility of this nature is very different from a private facility in terms of, you know, what you do there, the types of programming, the way you gain access and everything else. It also doesn't perform financially like a private facility, and that's where we're showing an operational loss in those options. And part of it is trying to get access so that people don't have to be members of a facility to utilize this. You know, I'm from out of town, but if that facility was there tonight, I could go plunk down my dollars for a pass for tonight, go in there, utilize it, I'm done. Certainly passes and our memberships would be available, but there's a lot of different ways to access the facility. So it's a different thing. You'll have people saying, well, I already belong to this facility. And what we say is, that's awesome. And what is, you know, there'd be other things you may want to do at our facility. Come on down, take that class, take that program, do something in our facility that is not available, or maybe somebody else in your household wants to be doing as well. And that's the beauty. You can kind of come and go as you want, but then also because of that limits our ability to cash flow the operation of the facility. So it's a different animal than the private sector in terms of what typically is available and how it's utilized by the general public.
Ken, I was really curious about this chart and
Yep.
another one. Here, it's like you give them 2 chances to say maybe and not sure.
Yep.
I mean, that's like, it's another opportunity to say no. So why did you have those 2 that are so similar in my mind?
Well, the survey company, when we put this together, they don't ever like to have just a yes, no, and a not sure. They want kind of, it's more on how it scales it between that yes and no.
So how do they define those 2?
Well, maybe basically says, you know, that's closer to yes, that says, okay, yeah, I like that a little bit better. Unsure is closer to no, going, I really don't know. So the way you see it set up there, you know, coming down from, in terms of level of support, yes, maybe, unsure, no.
Well, and likewise on this other one, you have high priority,
Yeah.
very high priority.
Yeah.
And to me, I combine those 2 and say, okay, there's 36% who's more than medium priority.
Yep. And that really is. I mean, part of the thing that was interesting out of this is that, you know, way over 50% thought this was at least a medium priority. And,
Yeah.
you know, and again, and pretty low percentage, 28 thought it was a low priority. So it is on people's minds in terms of, yeah, you know, we have an interest in this, how that translates. And then when we do some projects where that comes back as I don't really think that's something you need to worry about. Sometimes you go, look, that's not really seen as a priority. I would say this is worth consideration by the city and by council in terms of what you may want to do. It's on people's minds enough with that to do that. But again, I think part of that medium and even high number is once again the uncertainty of what are we talking about here? And it says, you know, it keeps people from making that either high or very low. There's, you know, you give more information, that will flesh out some of that middle ground a little bit more.
One of the, I mean, property taxes would go up to fund this for sure, but one of the things that strikes me is there's a huge number of large employers, well, not a huge number, but there are a number of large employers who partner sometimes, I know, with, I think, First and Fitness as a state employee. I get a member discount. Sometimes health insurance will pay for that. Did anything sort of look at that in this part of the study, or is that the next phase?
We have had discussions with some of the larger employers in the area to gauge levels of interest in this. You know, certainly at this point we don't have any commitments, but we have several that have indicated this is a project they're willing to look at. They're ones that a project they're willing potentially to even help with some level of funding yet to be defined. So, you know, we don't have anybody that's ready to sign the dotted line. We certainly haven't done an exhaustive study on that. But I think one of the things we were hoping is that if this was an option that the council wanted to pursue, there is a level of interest out there, and that, you'd be able to leverage out some of the bigger employers that be able to sit there and say, look, we're not gonna make up the difference, but we're involved in it. You can leverage that to get other levels of funding from other sources as well. And there's at least some indication that that's worth pursuing.
And in terms of, I'm just thinking about how Kellogg Hubbard goes to other area communities for funding as well. Would we be interested, or would the city, is there any appetite, or was that explored at all in this? Is going to other municipalities and for
We did think if we were gonna build a new facility, it was gonna have a regional focus, we should go to our other community partners and ask for some money. That's not big money. That turns out not to be big money,
Right.
but we would ask them for,
And I think
to
you
play.
continue to do that. And there's implications. If other communities don't want to partner, the price points of what they may have to do to gain access versus a resident of the community, they pay an upcharge potentially on that. So there are some opportunities. We have had some initial discussions, haven't exactly been, see them as viable equity partners at this point, but I don't know that that's absolutely definitive, and as this gets more defined, that needs to come back around again.
So something that I thought was really interesting in the survey was the number of people who currently use the rec center facilities generally in classes, and I think that was around 22%.
Yep.
And I found that surprisingly low for the amount of emphasis that we put on it. And that kind of made me take a step back and think, okay, so this is this big community service that we're providing, but a large share of our community is not utilizing it. And so what does that mean for how we prioritize this in the budget? And so, one takeaway might be that we need to do stuff to expand how desirable these services are. One takeaway might be that this isn't something that our population is really interested in using, and so maybe we should scale back our efforts in this area. So I'm curious how that participation rate compared to other communities that you've surveyed, and what you might take away from that.
Here's my take on this. Your rate of participation is low. It's actually a higher number than I maybe would have thought. To be honest with you, Berry Street Recreation Center, there's not much there.
Well, and I
Pretty
kind of,
limited scope.
when I read that question, had I answered that question, I would have assumed that you were asking about all of the rec department programming, not
No,
just, and that's, I would imagine that a bunch of people answered it that way. And there is a lot of rec department programming outside of the current rec center.
Oh, yeah, the intent was to gain who had actually used the Berry Street Recreation Center, not just recreation in general. But I would contend that you're limited in what you can offer in terms of general recreation programs on an indoor variety simply because of the limits of that. I think the interest in the survey says there's interest there. It can't be met. Even there was the other questions about, does this service your needs? And the response on those were very low, and that was just not this facility. That was very low compared to a lot of other locations. So I think there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, pent-up demand, that facility is not doing it. So I would say exactly the opposite. I don't think it's a question of whether you should invest more in that because not so many people are using it. I think the fact that you can only reach a pretty small percentage because of the shortcomings of your facility is the issue.
Yeah.
Question. Some people don't use it because it doesn't have a pool, it doesn't have exercise machines, et cetera. But a lot of people are trying to use it even for what it does have. I'm a regular user. The last time I went to play basketball, we had 20 people show up at lunchtime. We had to cycle through. You could only play half the time. There's tremendous competition for hours. So this time of year, that building is just used almost every hour of the week. And so the pickleballers are frustrated that they can only get the hours that they can get. There are a whole bunch of middle school age kids having basketball practices. So it's kind of maxed out is another factor.
And to Rosie's point, I wonder though if that's, I mean, that's obviously reflective of the people that are here now, and part of what Montpelier is trying to do is to grow and to attract new residents, and so I'm sure that there's probably research out there about this already, but in terms of like, you know, we're looking to grow the grand list, so we're, you know, investing in housing and all of those other things, would one of these particular models be more desirable or less desirable to populations that we're trying to bring in?
Interesting you should say that. You know, right before this, we had a community meeting, and it wasn't particularly well attended, but we had some pretty frank discussions, and some of it were with what I would say are younger people in their 20s, early 30s. And they made it pretty clear that they thought, you know, something that was more would, you know, they're saying, look, if Montpelier wants to try to attract people here and get a younger dynamic in place, you need these kind of facility, and beyond just Berry Street, they said that is not enough. So their whole premise was, and even to keep them here, it says, you know, we need more if you're trying to attract this younger population. So it kind of anecdotally got to your question there.
Just to follow that up, though, they also expressed some concern about raising
They
the
did.
property taxes, that it's, you know, they would like to buy houses in Montpelier, so at the same time, they were very anxious for us to pursue partners to try to hold the cost of the facility down. And some of the businesses actually said that this would help them attract employees to the area. They felt like that would be a draw.
So I think ultimately what we're looking from council is a little bit of direction on how you want us to proceed. We're kind of at this little more than 50%, maybe in the 2/3 range. So how do we deliver back to you something that meets your needs and expectations? We don't have to have an answer to that tonight, but at some point we want to have at least a blessing that we're heading in the right direction. What do you want to see us do? If you're saying, don't look at this option, we don't want to go there, that's fine. We just kind of want to have a little bit of insight.
Connor, you had a hand raised. Do you?
Yeah, what does fitness mean to you in this?
Fitness is anything from group exercise classes to, you know, functional fitness to machine weights to cardio. It's a broad term that covers a lot of that without having to break it out into all the particulars. But it's a, you know, active fitness-based program.
Do you see like possibility to slice this up even more? Like they got the Planet Fitness there, right? It's like 80 machines there.
Right.
You pay, what, $10 a month? Seems like a pretty good business model, right?
Yep.
I don't know if like the fitness equipment necessarily needs to be in this place. I look at Vermont College of Fine Art, they got a ton of space back there. Could you do a fitness center up there and a pool somewhere else maybe? Could it be phased in?
You can. One of the things is we talked about, just to keep in mind, we talked about doing, well, if you do Berry Street and you do a new records, the more we spread these pieces out, the less cost effective it is for whoever's operating it. So if the cities want to do that, your cost to be able to do that, both from a capital and an operational, will go up pretty dramatically. Your revenue potential is generally less because now people are having to go multiple locations. The model of trying to get as much into one area is kind of the most cost-effective way. In a lot of larger cities, we've been trying to consolidate facilities because they're not sustainable operationally or even capital-wise. So I just caution you that that's a difficult model to sustain over time.
Just one more point I think we should all be thinking about, like it was 18 years old plus who was surveyed on this.
Yeah, and we have it broken down by the age of the respondents. We also have the ability to look at data in terms of, so what did this age group, were their responses different than some, you know, so you want to look at, well, what do younger people say, what do older people say? If you look at the full survey document, there's like 200 pages back behind this stuff, and it's just the raw data, so you can look in there by age, by income levels, all sorts of different criteria, and you can kind of cut the data or see if there's anything that's different about that.
Right, I think the one point I just want to make is, you know, even though a lot of people are okay with getting there by car, you know, there's probably a lot of kids who walkability is a huge factor.
Yep.
And that might not be taken into consideration here.
Your walkability answer, I mean, we kept hearing that, but the response level, even out of the survey, was that was high, way high.
So, I don't know, Rosie, you have a comment, and then I would love to just go around and, if anybody has strong feelings about what you are interested in, what you want to support or don't want to support moving forward. I mean, this is not binding, obviously, at this point, so, general impressions are good, but, yeah, and then we can be moving on. Yeah.
So the one comment I wanted to make is that thinking about our current rec department programming and how we might pay for this in the future, if we use public money to create this thing, then I feel pretty strongly that the bar to entry and participation needs to be really low. And one of my concerns right now is that we have a lot of city money that goes to subsidizing, our rec classes and stuff, and then there's still a fee to use the classes. And I think that means that the lowest income members of our community can't actually enjoy the amenities that we as a community are paying for, including the lowest income members of the community. And so it's very counterintuitive because I also feel like, well, user fees, if you're gonna use the amenity, then you should pay for it. But I wanna be really careful that we don't try and split it down the middle too much and really support this with a lot of taxpayer money and then make the bar to entry so high that, through an annual fee or, a monthly fee, that half our community can't use it because it's too expensive. So that's just I don't have an answer to that. That's just a challenge that I think we have with these sorts of programs and with this type of project. And I just want the council to be aware of it and thinking about maybe we take an all or nothing approach where either it's, entirely city funded and we have no entry fees for residents, or maybe it's not really funded by the city and we figure out some kind of method for us to facilitate this, but that the city's really not putting any money in and it's fully user funded. So that's just a thought about that.
Done?
Arnie, I thought there was a sliding scale on the course fees, no?
We do help when people are in a situation. As far as classes go, I'm not sure of people who have been turned away for classes or haven't come because they can't afford it.
Is that I know that you help out when people ask, but it's not one of those things where we apply it across the board and make it really obvious that, for people below this income level, this is how we handle it or anything like that. And it's another one of those things where, we have this, if you're in the know, you can access it. If you're not, if you're from the outside, you don't know to ask. And so I would like us to be a little bit more transparent about that.
That's a good point. I also feel, this is like my own little pet thing, I suppose, but like I feel very strongly that learning how to swim ought to be free, because everyone ought to know how to swim. Anyway, but if you're going to take an ultimate camp, for example, they should charge a lot for that. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone doesn't need to know how to play ultimate, but
Instructor fees are so high.
that's right. I know.
One of the things we look at now is it's not unusual to kind of tier programs and services, so it gets at what you talk about that says swimming lessons are a basic service, so those are going to be priced at a different differential than your, like, even private swimming lessons is okay. That's a different level, or some of these other more things. So you have pricing scales that will adjust down there. And the more you can get programs spread between those things, the better your cost recovery is. I mean, just to put it in perspective, a facility that we're talking about on a new center with a pool, just for the sake of conversation, and your operating costs will be north of $1.5 million a year. So if you're not bringing in a pretty hefty amount of income to offset that, it becomes a non-workable issue. So the issue is, how do we make, or have the people that have the ability to pay, and how do we handle those that are under that bar that cannot? And a lot of facilities in some really socially and economically depressed areas have been able to work out systems that allow that to occur. Salvation Army and their Croc centers do that a lot. And so they're into communities that are very difficult, one in Boston and everything else, that says, okay, we're trying to make sure those that have the ability do, those that don't are taken care of. And we have all those people in the same facility with not even really knowing that says, you didn't pay anything and I paid this much on the thing. So there's workable systems out there that still get the numbers that you need for revenue. There's a lot of different options for how people utilize the facility that will really just push up the amount of people that are coming through there. And you can make decisions, you may say, we're gonna have swimming lessons for all second graders in the city that are free. Those types of things are done, and those are fine, and, you know, Arnie can sit there and tell you what the implications are of doing certain those things.
I just need to be told that revenue's not a factor.
You can have a lot of programs.
Oh, no, we make the school pay for it.
Yeah, there you go. So impressions from the council team for the direction for this crew? Go ahead.
So I was really charmed by the Berry Street building when we took the tour this year. I think having seen it back to back with the senior center and the amazing renovation in the senior center, I can really see the potential for that building being a beautiful space. And to me, I think that that's, you know, we have an opportunity with this historic building that's in a great location for a cost that isn't as big a hit to the city budget, to make that space more usable. And so that's intriguing to me. I still have budget concerns, and I want to, you know, make sure that we're not continuously having an unsustainable tax rate. But I could see some real big advantages to the city in that, with renovating the existing space. I'm really, really wary of taking on the commitment of a city-run aquatic center, you know, knowing the capacity of our city staff and knowing the capacity of our city for a tax base. So, and I can't think of it's really important to me that it be a walkable location, even if it is an aquatic center. And I can't think of a good location within the city to have that happen. And I feel like if we have another car-based pool outside of the city, how is that better than First and Fitness from a, you know, an accessible point of view for elderly folks in the city who are trying to be able to stay fit and not wanting to drive, and from a, you know, it just, from an environmental perspective, there just seem like so many disadvantages to putting some kind of destination outside of the walkable core. So those are kind of where I'm at right now.
Donna?
Well, from the other end, I did not fall in love with the tour. I hadn't been in the building for a long time, and I just felt sad for it, that it just really needs help. But I am sold by the numbers that people are really looking for exercise, and there's a lot of small rooms there, as well as the basement. With true renovation, it can create a lot of niches for different things. So I'm much more into not just the rehab, but the improvements. That's much more sellable financially and use-wise, and it is in the core of walkability.
Other thoughts?
I'd agree with Donna.
Jack?
I know a big driver of this discussion are a group of people who really, really want a pool. And they are very committed to wanting that. But I think that it's hard to, as Rosie said, see, we agree on stuff. As Rosie said, it's hard to see the capacity and the willingness of voters of Montpelier to do something that big. It would take a lot to convince me of that. I see Rosie and Donna talking about saying kind of the same thing about the current rec center in different ways, which is that there's real potential there. And I would like to continue to look at expanding that to see what we could generate.
Any further thoughts? If not, that's fine. Yeah.
I guess I'm, and maybe it's because I'm naive, although I don't know that I've been called that in probably 33 years. I'm curious about the TIF options and what may exist there. And additionally, I'm wondering, you know, assuming the responsibility of an aquatic center is something just based on finances alone that I don't think I could in good conscience vote for. However, I'm wondering if there may be ways that we can make something like that happen, whether it's a partnership with, First in Fitness that is an actual partnership which would, really translate meaningfully to residents in Montpelier having access to a facility that already exists. Or finding ways to, really actually partner with surrounding communities to sort of go in all together in some way for a regional facility that everyone could use. I know how many people approached me about the pool idea, and I love it. I think it's great. I would swim all the time. But that sort of taxpayer burden that would translate into a significant increase in rent in Montpelier, it is just not sustainable to me, so.
Okay, and you don't need to weigh in if you don't
I'm
want to.
good, I need more time to process.
Okay,
Have
great.
some ideas, I'm not sure if they're good.
Sure. Fair. Does that provide a sufficient amount of direction for the time being? And I know you all are going to go do further work on this and are coming back at some point to take up this conversation again.
Can you fit a new facility on top of a parking garage?
You laugh, but we're getting ready to do one in South Florida. It'll be on the
There we
top
go.
of the parking garage.
Yeah, there you go.
Go.
Ken, can we have your slide presentation tonight given to us?
I think you do.
I didn't,
I don't know if we
I
do.
didn't
I
get
don't
it.
think
We just
they do.
changed, so, but we can
And it's
certainly
not
make
on the
that
Oh,
available.
it was the
I can get it
report.
for
I'm
you.
sorry, it
Yeah,
wasn't
the
the slides, it
report.
was
So
the
I think what
report.
we'll do, if this sounds right, is bring you all a sort of fleshed out renovation proposal perhaps for the Berry facility, and maybe sort of keep a little conversation going on the side with partners for a larger aquatic facility, if that should come through.
Great.
Does that sound?
At least for me, that was renovation and improvement.
And
He actually,
improvement.
he actually gave two little
The
options there,
survey
okay.
showed what people were looking
Yep.
for, and a lot of that can be done in the Berry.
That's great.
building.
And I think
Thank
that,
you.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so on to the discussion of public message board. Now, this is an item that Councilor Kruger had brought up at some point. Do you want to frame this?
Sure. So I've thought generally about how we as a council are limited in our communications by public meeting law, and also how all our committees are limited in communication by public meeting law, in that you can't have those sort of back and forth email discussions, hey, here's this article I saw, what do you think about that? And oh, this reminds me of something else. All of those discussions, if they're kind of relating to substance, really can't happen outside of a physical public meeting. And that's state law. And I've seen, being on some of the various committee email lists and stuff, I've seen people struggle with that and have to be reminded that, hey, you can't just reply all and give your opinion on this because it's not a public meeting. So I think that if there were some kind of electronic forum where people could have those discussions and it would be readily viewable by the public, and that would still meet the intent of the public meeting law, although it currently doesn't meet the letter of the law, I think that could really help move discussions along and, make involvement in public discourse more accessible to people who can't necessarily afford to attend a 4-hour meeting in person, and can't necessarily afford to sit and watch our 4-hour meeting, even though it's recorded and available online. That's still a major time commitment to see what we're talking about. So I think that this is a tool. It certainly wouldn't replace our current meetings and replace our current committee meetings, but it's a tool to make those more productive. And so I would like us to ask our legislators to consider making some sort of amendment to Vermont public meeting law to allow for communities to have electronic message boards that are used by members of their governing bodies and their committees to have some of these discussions outside of a public forum.
So I've done a little bit of, not a lot, but a little bit of thinking around this, and so the question for me comes down to the logistics, right, and making it accessible, because I think we all want it to be, accessible even to people who don't have electronic capacities. And so, just as a first step towards that, one of the things I could picture potentially is, like, let's say it's just a threaded discussion within a committee. They want to have a discussion around, some topic that seems relevant. If it were some kind of, what if we could call it like a supplemental conversation, and that it could be approved along with the minutes of the meeting, so that it's, accessible as the minutes of any prior meeting, then that would be one first step towards that. And I think having, some thinking through, like, okay, so how do people, not, connected to electronics or not preferring to interact that way, is it still equitable, and is it still accessible? And that's one possibility. Just putting it out there. Other thoughts?
I just had a simple logistic question in terms of if we're going to do this. Do you envision this, or does the council envision this as being for the bodies only, or would there also be public comment? And I'm sure I'll be asked that. So would it be, in between meetings, the council's working over something and Julia wants to weigh in on it, can she do that? Or is that only, no, this is a chance to read this, but we still have the public comment here?
So I guess I was envisioning some sort of, it's a back and forth between the members of the body, but there is some kind of public comment section where members of the public could generally address the committee through an electronic forum, and have that be public if they wished.
So what you're envisioning is like a whole new platform, right? That you would have to go to.
So I'm envisioning that we ask the legislature to allow us to, if we can show that whatever electronic forum we're able to produce, and it might be different for Montpelier than it is for another community, but if we can show that this is, the public can participate and see and, be involved, that they would allow that. And then what we actually do with that authority after we get it, we can figure out, what platform do we use and how does it work and all the logistics around that. And maybe, I know Donna's very concerned about this, maybe you have a group like us that decides, Donna doesn't really like participating in this sort of written back and forth, and she would rather discuss in person. And so maybe as a group we decide, well, we're not really going to use that. But maybe if we're a small subcommittee working group, and I ran into this, when we have subcommittees of 3 people, you can't have any discussions outside of your meetings at all. You can't even explain to somebody, what's going on or what your thinking is or what your next steps are outside, because 2 of the 3 of you make a majority. And so, it's very impractical. So maybe we end up, using it for those situations and not for whole public council discussions. I just want the authority from the legislature to do this.
So maybe it could be even the kind of thing where if the whole group doesn't agree, then you just don't do it, maybe.
Yeah.
Connor?
I'm just wondering, would it be worth having Secretary Condos come in and just have kind of a round table with us? He's a very engaged constituent. He's a little engaged sometimes, but I bet he'd be happy to come down and just kind of throw some ideas out. Because the other thing is, if we bring it to the legislature and the SOS opposes it, I don't like our odds anyways. So I'd almost rather start working kind of collaboratively with them to come up with something.
Good.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I saw Rosie and then Donna. Ashley. Just cut you, Rosie.
The other thing I'm wondering about is just getting an advisory opinion from the Secretary of State about the feasibility, in terms of, like, is that something that could be permitted with some reading of public meeting law? And then that might give us some insight in terms of how we could shape or structure a conversation going forward.
I thought Bill sent us an email about this. Maybe I read it somewhere else. I just like a picture. I don't know how you can have a conversation over here that involves a few people from this body and a few of the public, and then meanwhile you have this meeting that's official and you have this discussion over here. So do we sit and have to read all of this to know what's going to happen here? And how does it not become a front porch forum where a small group just takes on this topic and gets it way out left field? So those are my concerns.
Jack?
I think it's an intriguing idea, because we all know that there's, for most issues that we discuss here, we don't get a lot of public input at our meetings. But I also kind of worry if there's as full a discussion as one could imagine on this message board, well, people show up at the meeting and their reaction was going to be, well, I wanted to tell them what I thought, but the decision was already made, because they've been talking about this for 3 weeks on their computers. And so
Those are fair criticisms. I think that those are all things that we need to figure out
So I
in
say
implementation, but.
So I'm saying explore it. I'm not saying no, but there are some concerns.
What do we, I'm trying to think of like next steps here, team. Where do
So-
we want to go with this?
I would be happy to make a motion that we direct city staff to reach out for an advisory opinion to the Secretary of State's office about the current state of the law and what nuance may exist there to allow for something like this. I second that.
That's okay. All right, further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So.
Before we go off that topic, I don't know if that has to be the end of it, because I suspect that either they'll take longer than we want them to give us an advisory opinion, or more likely they'll very quickly say, yeah, this isn't allowed under current law. So I think Connor's suggestion of inviting Jim Condos to come in and just be part of a discussion while that's going on might be a good idea. And I'm not making a motion, I'm just thinking if someone wants to do it.
I think that would be fine if we can express, our realities to him and say, where can we go with this? Yeah, I'd be interested in that. In my mind, it's already mid-March, and so I don't think we could do anything before that, which means, you wouldn't be here. But
I just wanted to plant the seed, and I think that it's something that might be useful to some future councils and some future committees, and so if you guys go through this process and find that it doesn't seem workable and you can't figure out a way to address some of these challenges, then that's fine. We've talked about it, and I won't be offended.
okay, well, let's look into that when we can. So
Talk to the secretary.
great. Okay, so thank you all. All right, I think that wraps up our regular business. So we're going to do some council reports, then we have other reports, and then we're going to have three executive session topics, and I don't think we're going to be.
No action.
We have no action coming out of that, so. In any case, who would like to start with council reports? I'm going to just pick on someone if no one volunteers. Glenn, would you like to go?
Come tomorrow morning to Baggitos. Excuse me. I think that's all I have this week. Thanks.
Go ahead, Connor.
Scooter survey in the field now, so should have some stats for you in the coming weeks. Also, I dropped the ball on this a while ago, but resurrected that sister city committee there. So Philip Tom Abdullah will be at the helm of that, working with Harris Webster to hopefully generate some ideas, and maybe not too soon, but just have a discussion at council.
Nice. Donna.
We have definitely some people on the transportation committee who'd like to be on the scooters. So people have been asking, just so you know, the interest is there.
Sure.
Okay, to evaluate and,
We can do
okay.
demos.
Today, there was a good meeting despite the weather on the micro transit, and there is a lot of research being done with land use as well as marketing and looking at it much more holistically as a demand response. Very interesting group, and I think I'm pleased that it's made a lot of progress out of just a narrow focus to being much more expansive of all transit users and all transit systems. So it's good.
Cool, great. Can we swing on to Rosie?
I just wanted to use the opportunity to try and pass on some issues that I've been thinking about that I never really got a chance to to finish up. We approved the certificate of highway mileage today, which made me remember that Ledgewood Terrace is still in a limbo state. This is a street that we have not officially accepted as a city street because of some weird stuff with the developer. Tom McCardle is very knowledgeable about this, and it is on his list, but I just want to remind the council of this. I don't want, 50 years from now to have some of those issues that we had earlier this year with a different street. I don't want that to crop up. And so it would behoove the council to make sure that this is addressed in the somewhat near future. It's not an urgent issue, but it's one of those things to remember, and to eventually have it in a place where the city can accept it as an official street. I'm sure the residents of Ledgewood Terrace would love to have that solidified. Along those same, not really the same lines, but in the same discussion that I had with Bill and Tom, the city owns a parcel on Berlin Street that was a contaminated site that the city ended up taking under its control and doing some remediation work. I believe as you're going up Berlin Street, it is kind of that grassy piece of land on the left. And it's just a city-owned piece of land that we've done remediation on, and kind of on Tom's non-urgent list. So, he's got lots of urgent things, so I'm not sure that it's a high priority, was to kind of look into it and see if there was anything that we could do with it at this point in terms of, has it been remediated enough to be able to do something with it. I think it's an intriguing little piece of land because maybe it could be at some point a city park, a playground or something like that. Right now we're just mowing it. So just passing that on, keeping your brains, it would, I'd like to fully utilize all our city resources, and so that's one underutilized potentially city resource.
Can you just say where it is again?
It's on Berlin Street. I think we have it currently as number 0 Berlin Street.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have an address.
But it's like,
Just about the bus shelter.
it's like across from 165, 167, in that neighborhood. It used to be called used to be a building there. It was called the Creamery.
Huh, okay.
Uphill from if you drive up the hill, there's like a tan ranch house on the left, and where Uncle Levine used to live, and it's just past that.
Okay. Cool. I'll check that out.
So I just wanted to put that on your radar. It was something that I'd kind of been in discussions. I'm sure that, Tom has been swamped with everything else, so it's not a high priority, but could be an interesting thing to work on at some point.
Cool, thank you. Jack?
Speaking of Tom being swamped, I've just had a couple of constituent issues where people have contacted me and had a complaint or concern about something. I've forwarded those to the manager, and I'm always very impressed by the promptness of the response from the manager and the other department heads.
Ashley?
I would echo what Jack said. I got some emails that I passed along, and Tom responded and sent very thoughtful responses despite being out completely straight for the last several weeks. And I had another thing, but I forgot.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to pass. I don't have anything to report.
Clerk just left.
And Clerk just left, so if he wants to come back and afterwards, or when he comes back, he has something to say, great.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I don't have a lot. Just remind you, we are meeting next Wednesday to continue our conversation from last week.
Great.
And then I have more to say shortly.
Okay.
Hey, Tom.
I wonder if we want to just pop our head in the doorway there to see if John has anything to, John,
Here we go.
see if John Odom is there. I would hate to like close the meeting without giving him an opportunity.
Well, and he's gonna
Right, and he is also
keeping the minutes.
keeping minutes, so. But if he's not there, you know, then, sounds like he's there.
Yeah, I wonder where.
We'll delay. 30 seconds here for you. Would you like to, do you have any report there, sir?
Oh, just that early voting is incredibly slow. Come on, everybody, come out. But also, I'm glad you meant this certificate of highway mileage. I did not get the original handed to me to pass around, so it just made me think, I always bug people to give me the things. So I just printed out something that I hope will do, which is the image of it. I know you're supposed to send the original. Didn't get it. So I would just pass this around and maybe everybody can sign it, and I hope it'll be good enough. I hope it works for Tom. But,
Okay. Great, so that is the end of our business, or in public session tonight. So do we have a motion to go into executive session?
I would move that we go into executive session to discuss personnel and real estate and
Litigation.
Litigation matters pursuant to 1 VSA section 317.
313.
313.
Okay.
I'll get there eventually.
A1E.
Subsection A,
A2,
1E,
and
A2, and
There you
A4.
go, there you go. Is there a second? Okay, there's a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, and we will not be returning to public session. We have no action to take. All right, thank you very much.